The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. when Daniel Carter's entire life pivoted on a single whispered request. His boss's wife sat in the passenger seat, mascara stained and trembling, her diamond wedding ring catching the streetlight like a warning flare. "Please," she breathed, her voice cracking the careful silence he'd maintained for 6 years as a single father. "Don't take me home yet. Just drive somewhere private." Daniel's hands went white on the steering wheel. One wrong move, one misunderstood moment, and everything he'd built for his daughter would collapse. But the desperation in Elena Rhodes's voice wasn't seduction. It was something far more dangerous, truth demanding to be heard. Before we dive into this story of courage, consequences, and impossible choices, I want to invite you on this journey with me. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, whether it's a quiet night in New York, a rainy evening in London, or dawn breaking over Tokyo, drop your city in the comments below. Let me see how far this story travels, and if it moves you, hit that like button. Now let's begin where everything changed. The email had arrived at 10:43 p.m., exactly 17 minutes before Daniel Carter's shift was supposed to end. "Carter, Elena needs a ride home from the charity gala. I'm tied up in meetings until midnight. You're still at the office. Handle it. Car service details below." Mr. Daniel had stared at the message on his phone screen, the blue light harsh against the dim parking garage. His daughter Mia was already asleep at his sister's place, her geography homework probably still unfinished on the kitchen table. He'd promised to pick her up by 11. He'd promised a lot of things lately that he couldn't quite keep. But you didn't say no to Marcus Rhodes. Not when Marcus Rhodes signed your paychecks. Not when those paychecks paid for Mia's braces and her school supplies and the modest 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood safe enough that Daniel could sleep 3 hours a night without jolting awake at every sound. Not when you were a single father with exactly one marketable skill, surviving, and a resume that couldn't afford any gaps. So Daniel had texted his sister, running late, emergency at work. "So sorry." And driven to the Beverly Hills Hotel, where Los Angeles' wealthiest gathered to applaud themselves for writing checks to causes they'd never truly understand. The circular driveway blazed with lights. Valets in crisp uniforms moved like choreographed dancers, opening doors for women in gowns that cost more than Daniel's annual rent. He pulled the black Mercedes, Marcus's spare car, worth more than Daniel would earn in 5 years, into the pickup zone and waited. He'd seen Elena Rhodes exactly 3 times in the 6 years he'd worked as Marcus's executive assistant. Once, briefly, at the company holiday party, where she'd worn emerald green and smiled with practiced perfection while Marcus worked the room, his hand possessive on the small of her back. Once in a framed photograph on Marcus's desk, a professional portrait so airbrushed it barely looked human. And once, unexpectedly, when she'd arrived at the office unannounced. Daniel had been alone, working late as usual. She'd stood in the doorway looking lost, asking if Marcus was there. When Daniel had said no, she'd thanked him with a voice so quiet he'd almost missed it, then disappeared like she'd never existed at all. Now watching the hotel entrance, Daniel checked his phone. 11:02 p.m. Mia would be worried. His sister would be frustrated. This was the 4th time this month he'd been late. Just this once, he told himself. Just get through tonight. Then Elena Rhodes emerged from the hotel lobby, and Daniel's carefully constructed world began its slow, irreversible collapse. She looked nothing like the woman in Marcus's photograph. Her gown was black, simple, expensive in the way that whispered rather than shouted. But it was her face that stopped Daniel's breath, not because she was beautiful, though she was, in a way that seemed almost painful, like something precious kept too long in the dark. It was her eyes, red-rimmed, haunted, desperately trying to hide behind a mask of composure that kept slipping. Daniel stepped out of the car quickly, moving around to open the passenger door. "Mrs. Rhodes." She flinched at the name, actually flinched, like he'd struck her. "Elena," she said quietly. "Please, just Elena." Up close, Daniel could see the tremor in her hands, the way she gripped her small clutch purse like a lifeline. Her perfume was subtle, jasmine and something darker, sadder. Her diamond necklace caught the light, each stone probably worth more than his car. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, except her eyes. Her eyes screamed something else entirely. "Of course," Daniel said carefully. "The car's ready whenever you are." She slid into the passenger seat without a word, and Daniel closed the door with the gentle precision he'd learned working for people who expected things to simply happen around them, smoothly and invisibly. He settled behind the wheel, adjusted the mirrors he'd already adjusted, and pulled away from the hotel's golden glow into the Los Angeles night. For the first 10 minutes, silence. Daniel knew the route to the Rhodes estate in Bel Air. He'd delivered documents there twice before, leaving them with a housekeeper who'd accepted the packages without ever inviting him past the gate. 42 minutes in current traffic. 42 minutes of careful silence, professional distance, nothing that could be misinterpreted or weaponized. He focused on the road. The Mercedes handled like a dream, smooth and powerful, so different from his own aging Honda Civic with its temperamental air conditioning and the check engine light he'd been ignoring for 3 months because mechanics charged what miracles cost. Beside him, Elena sat motionless, her gaze fixed on something beyond the window. The city scrolled past, glittering towers and dark valleys, wealth and want existing in the same impossible geography. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "Mia's asking for you. Everything okay?" His chest tightened. He typed back one-handed. "Almost done." 30 minutes. Another lie. Another promise bent into a shape that might hold until morning. "You have a child." Daniel's head snapped toward Elena. She wasn't looking at him, still staring out the window, but her voice had changed, softer, more present. Yes," Daniel said carefully. "A daughter. Mia. She's 11. What's she like?" The question was so unexpected, so genuinely curious, that Daniel answered before his professional filter could engage. "She's everything. Smart, funny. She wants to be a marine biologist even though we've never been to the ocean. She draws pictures of whales and hangs them all over our apartment." He caught himself, cleared his throat. "Sorry, you probably don't—" "No," Elena interrupted. "Please, I want to know." There was something in her voice, a hunger. Not for him, Daniel realized, for normalcy, for a life that existed outside whatever gilded cage she inhabited. "She's the reason I do everything," Daniel said quietly. "Every choice I make, it's for her. To give her stability, safety, a chance at something better than I had." "What about what you want?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Daniel had no answer. He couldn't remember the last time he'd thought about what he wanted. Want was a luxury. Want was dangerous. Want was what you gave up the moment you became solely responsible for another human's survival. "What I want doesn't matter," he finally said. "No," Elena whispered. "It should. It always should." They were on Sunset Boulevard now, climbing into the hills where the houses grew larger and the gates grew higher. 15 minutes to the Rhodes estate. 15 minutes, and this strange, unsettling conversation would end, and Daniel would return to his carefully controlled life. Then Elena spoke again, and everything changed. "Please don't take me home yet." Daniel's foot eased off the accelerator instinctively. "Mrs. Rhodes, Elena, he corrected carefully. "I'm supposed to drive you to—" "I know what you're supposed to do," she said, and now she turned to face him fully. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I know exactly what everyone's supposed to do. Marcus is supposed to be in meetings until midnight. I'm supposed to smile at the gala and wear the right dress and say the right things. You're supposed to drive me home like the good employee you are. We're all supposed to play our parts." Her voice was rising now, not with anger, but with something more desperate, a dam breaking after years of pressure. "But just this once," she continued, her hands twisting in her lap, "just for tonight, I need to be somewhere that isn't that house, somewhere that isn't playing the part. Please." Every instinct Daniel had developed over 6 years of careful, cautious survival screamed at him to refuse, to drive straight to Bel Air, deposit her safely at her mansion, and forget this conversation ever happened. But he'd heard that tone before. He'd heard it in his own voice 3 years ago, at 2 a.m, sitting in his car outside his ex-wife's lawyer's office after signing papers that dissolved his marriage and granted him sole custody of a terrified 8-year-old girl. That sound of someone drowning in a life they never chose, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Daniel pulled the Mercedes into the empty parking lot of a closed coffee shop and killed the engine. "Where do you want to go?" "Well." They drove north, away from Bel Air's manicured perfection, into the hills where the city lights spread below like a glittering infection. Elena directed him with quiet precision. "Turn here, follow this road, keep going," until they reached a small overlook Daniel had never known existed. He parked facing the view. Los Angeles stretched endlessly below them, a galaxy of human ambition and desperation, dreams and delusions all burning with the same artificial light. Daniel killed the engine. The silence that followed felt massive, filled with questions neither of them quite knew how to ask. "I used to come here," Elena said softly, "before I married Marcus, when I was still painting. Still myself." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Like I'm playing the tragic wife in some bad movie." "No," Daniel said honestly. "It sounds like you're telling the truth." Elena's breath caught. She turned to him, and in the dim light from the dashboard, her face looked young and ancient all at once. "Nobody wants the truth. The truth is inconvenient. The truth doesn't photograph well at charity galas." "I'm listening," Daniel said quietly. "If you want to tell it." And perhaps it was the darkness, or the strange intimacy of the closed car, or the simple fact that Daniel was nobody. Not her husband's colleague, not her social circle, not someone who could use her words as weapons later. Perhaps it was just that Elena Rhodes had been silent for so long that the words had turned toxic inside her, and speaking them was the only way to survive. She began to talk. "Look, I was 24 when I met Marcus," Elena said, her gaze fixed on the city below. "Fresh out of grad school with an MFA and about $40,000 in student debt. I was painting, working 3 part-time jobs, living in this terrible studio apartment in Silver Lake where the hot water worked maybe twice a week." She smiled at the memory, and for a moment Daniel glimpsed who she might have been, someone bright and determined and whole. "I was happy," she continued, "broke and exhausted and living on ramen noodles, but happy. I had a gallery show coming up, small venue, nothing fancy, but it was mine, my work, my vision." "What did you paint?" Daniel asked. "Faces," Elena said immediately. "People in transition, that moment when someone's mask slips and you see who they really are underneath. Joy, grief, fear, all those things we try to hide." She laughed softly. "Ironic, isn't it? I spent years capturing other people's truth, and then I married someone who made me bury my own." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "Marcus came to that gallery show," she went on. "He was there with clients, part of some corporate art buying thing. But he stopped in front of one of my paintings, this portrait of an old woman laughing, really laughing, the kind of joy that's too big to contain, and he just stared at it. For 10 minutes. Elena's fingers traced patterns on her clutch purse. Afterward, he found me, introduced himself, told me I was the most talented artist he'd ever encountered. He bought 3 pieces, took me to dinner. Within a month, we were dating." "He was charming," Daniel offered. "He was a hurricane," Elena corrected. "Overwhelming, passionate. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world who mattered, like everything you'd ever wanted was suddenly possible." Her voice dropped. "And I was stupid enough to believe him." "You weren't stupid," Daniel said quietly. "I was 24 and broke, and convinced that struggling meant failing," Elena countered. "When Marcus offered me a life without struggle, without 3 jobs and student debt and hot water that didn't work, I took it. I told myself it was love. Maybe it was, at the beginning, or maybe I just wanted it to be." She fell silent for a moment, and Daniel didn't push. He understood the weight of decisions made in desperation, the way survival could be mistaken for choice. "We married 6 months later," Elena finally continued. "Big wedding, 300 guests, magazine coverage. I wore Vera Wang and smiled for the cameras and told myself this was happiness. And Marcus was proud, you know? Proud to have this beautiful young artist on his arm. His friends called me his discovery, like I was some rare object he'd collected." The pain in her voice was palpable now. For the first year I kept painting, Marcus even set up a studio for me in the house. This gorgeous room with perfect light, everything I could possibly need. But I was so busy with his life, his events, his schedule. The paintings got smaller, less frequent, and Marcus started suggesting changes. Elena's hands clenched. He'd say things like, "That's a bit dark for the living room, don't you think?" Or, "Maybe try something more uplifting." Or, "My clients prefer landscapes." Small suggestions, always framed as helpful, always undermining exactly what made my work mine. "He wanted to control what you created," Daniel said. "He wanted to control everything," Elena corrected sharply. "What I painted, what I wore, who I talked to, how I spent my time. It happened so gradually I barely noticed. Like a frog in boiling water, you know? By the time I realized what was happening, I was already cooked." She took a shaky breath, and Daniel could see her fighting for composure. 2 years into the marriage, I stopped painting entirely. Told myself it was just a break, that I'd start again when things settled down. But things never settled. Marcus always had another event, another obligation, another reason why I needed to focus on being Mrs. Marcus Rhodes instead of Elena Petrov, artist. "Petrov?" Daniel said. "That's your name?" "Was my name," Elena whispered. "Before I became someone's wife, someone's accessory, someone's beautifully dressed ghost." The rawness in her voice made Daniel's chest ache. He thought of his daughter, of the fierce way Mia approached the world, all questions and curiosity and refusal to be diminished. What would it do to her, he wondered, to have that fire slowly extinguished over years of small compromises and quiet erasures? "Tonight at the gala," Elena continued, "Marcus introduced me to some investor, said, 'This is my wife, Elena. She used to be an artist.'" Used to be. Like I died. Like that person doesn't exist anymore. She turned to Daniel then, her eyes bright with tears that refused to fall. "And the worst part is he's right. I look in the mirror and I don't recognize myself anymore. I live in a mansion I never wanted. I attend parties I hate. I smile for photographs and play the perfect wife, and every single day I disappear a little more. And I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of pretending this is a life instead of a very expensive prison." The words hung between them, true and terrible. Daniel didn't offer empty comfort. He didn't tell her it would be okay or that things would get better. He'd learned through his own slow dismantling and painful rebuilding that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was simply witness someone's truth without trying to fix it. "When did you know?" he asked quietly. "That you needed to leave?" Elena's laugh was hollow. "Leave? I can't leave." "Why not?" "Because I have nothing," she said, and now the tears did fall, silent and silver in the dashboard light. "No money of my own, no career, no paintings worth selling. I destroyed most of them in a fit of rage 3 years ago, and the rest Marcus donated to charity for the tax write-off. My friends from before the marriage have all moved on. My family thinks I'm living the dream. Where would I even go? What would I even do?" "You'd survive," Daniel said simply. "How? I'm 33 years old with a useless MFA and a 7-year gap in my resume. Who's going to hire me? What job could I possibly get that would pay enough to live on? I'd end up right back where I started, broke and struggling and—" "Free," Daniel interrupted. Elena stopped, stared at him. "You'd be free," Daniel repeated. "Broke and struggling, maybe, but free to paint what you want, free to make your own choices, free to recognize yourself in the mirror again. You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Daniel said. "It's the hardest thing in the world, but it's possible. I know because I did it." Elena wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "You?" Daniel nodded slowly. This wasn't a story he told often, wasn't a story he liked remembering, but Elena had offered him her truth, raw and bleeding. The least he could do was return the favor. "I was married," he began, "to Sarah. We met in college, got married right after graduation. She wanted the big life, nice house, nice car, all of it. I wanted to make her happy, so I worked. Took a corporate job I hated, 60-hour weeks, climbed the ladder like I was supposed to." He could still remember those years, the feeling of drowning in a suit and tie. "Then Mia came along," Daniel continued, "and Sarah got unhappy. Motherhood wasn't what she expected. I wasn't home enough. We weren't wealthy enough. Everything was wrong, and it was all my fault. She started drinking, started staying out late, started making it very clear that she'd settled for a life she never wanted. Elena listened in silence, her expression shifting from pain to recognition. When Mia was 6, Sarah told me she was leaving. She'd met someone else, someone with more money, better prospects. She wanted a divorce, and she wanted custody of Mia, not because she wanted to be a mother, but because she knew it would hurt me most. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, even though the car was parked. I fought for 2 years, he said quietly. Spent every dollar I had on lawyers. Documented every time Sarah showed up drunk to pick Mia up from school. Every missed birthday. Every broken promise. And I won, full custody. But it cost me everything, my savings, my career, my health. I had to quit that corporate job because I couldn't afford childcare for the hours they demanded. Took this position with Marcus because it was the only thing that paid enough and gave me flexibility. How do you do it? Elena asked. Work for someone like Marcus, play the part, when you know what it costs? Because Mia needs stability, Daniel said. Because I chose her over my pride, over my freedom, over everything else. I made that choice deliberately. You didn't choose this, Elena. You were sold a lie and slowly trapped in it. That's different. Is it, though? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Don't we all make compromises? Give up pieces of ourselves for survival? There's a difference between compromise and erasure, Daniel said firmly. Compromise means you negotiate. You give some, you keep some. Erasure means you disappear. And that's what's happening to you. Elena closed her eyes, and Daniel watched a tear trace down her perfect, miserable face. 3 months ago, she said softly, I looked up a divorce attorney, made an appointment, sat in his office for an hour discussing my options. He said I could probably get a good settlement, given the prenup Marcus made me sign was likely unconscionable. He said I should start documenting everything, building a case. Daniel's pulse quickened. What happened? I went home, Elena said, opening her eyes. Marcus was there, getting ready for some dinner. He asked where I'd been. I told him shopping. He kissed my forehead and told me I looked beautiful and walked out the door. And I stood in that enormous empty house and convinced myself I was being dramatic, that plenty of women had it worse, that I should be grateful for what I had. Her voice cracked on the last word. I called the attorney the next morning and canceled everything. Told myself I just needed to try harder, be better, make it work. She looked at Daniel. I've been telling myself that for 3 months, and tonight, when Marcus introduced me as someone who used to be an artist, I realized I was never going to stop telling myself that. I was going to spend the rest of my life making excuses for why I stayed in a beautiful prison. Until now, Daniel said. Until now, Elena echoed. Because I told you, and saying it out loud makes it real. And I don't know if I'm brave enough to do anything about it, but at least now I know the truth. At least I've stopped lying to myself. They sat in silence for a long moment, the city lights burning below them, two strangers who'd accidentally seen each other clearly in the dark. Finally, Daniel spoke. I'm going to tell you something, and you can do whatever you want with it. But I need you to hear me. Elena nodded. Go home tonight, Daniel said. Play the part one more time. But tomorrow morning, call that attorney back. Don't think about it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Just call. Because every day you stay is a day you're choosing to disappear, and you deserve better than that. I'm afraid, Elena whispered. Being afraid is normal, Daniel said. Being afraid means you know the stakes, but fear is better than regret. Fear you can work through. Regret just compounds. What if I fail? What if I can't make it on my own? Then you fail, Daniel said simply. And you get up and try again. That's what survival looks like. It's not pretty or perfect or Instagram-worthy. It's messy and hard, and sometimes you eat ramen for dinner 3 nights in a row. But it's yours. And that matters more than you think. Elena was crying openly now, and Daniel reached across the console, offering his hand. She took it, her grip desperate and grateful all at once. Thank you, she said. For listening, for not trying to fix it, or judge it, or pretend it's anything other than what it is. You don't need fixing, Daniel said. You need freedom, and only you can give yourself that. They stayed there a while longer, hands clasped, Two people holding each other steady against the weight of choices not yet made, but already inevitable. Daniel drove Elena home just after midnight. The Rhodes estate loomed before them, all security gates and architectural perfection and carefully cultivated beauty, hiding carefully cultivated misery. The lights were still on. Marcus must be home now, waiting. Daniel pulled up to the gate, entered the code Elena provided, and drove up the winding driveway to the front entrance. The house was even more impressive up close, all glass and steel in California modern design. It looked like something from a magazine. It looked nothing like a home. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately move to leave. She sat there staring at the house like a soldier about to enter battle. "I'm terrified," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "What if I can't do it? What if I go inside and everything goes back to normal and I just stay?" Daniel thought about his daughter, about the nights he'd held Mia while she cried for a mother who didn't want her, about the mornings he'd woken up exhausted and broke and uncertain, but still gotten up because someone was depending on him. "Then you stay," he said, "and tomorrow you try again, and the day after that. You keep trying until one day you don't talk yourself out of it. That's all courage is, Elena, not the absence of fear, just the decision to act despite it." Elena turned to him, and even in the dim light, Daniel could see something shifting in her expression, something hardening, resolving. "The attorney's name is David Chen," she said. "His office is in Santa Monica. I still have his card." "Call him tomorrow," Daniel urged. "I will." She paused. "What about you? When Marcus finds out you drove me around instead of straight home, when he realizes we talked—" "Let me worry about that," Daniel said. "He'll fire you." "Maybe. You have a daughter depending on you. I can't afford to teach my daughter that fear is more important than doing what's right," Daniel interrupted gently. "She's watching me, Elena. Every choice I make, she sees, and I want her to see someone who helps people when they need it, even when it costs something." Elena's eyes filled with tears again. "You're a good father." "I'm trying to be." She reached for the door handle, then stopped. "Daniel, whatever happens, thank you for tonight, for listening, for reminding me that I used to be someone who mattered." "You still matter," Daniel said firmly. "You never stopped. You just forgot for a while." Elena smiled, a real smile, sad and beautiful and true, and stepped out of the car. Daniel watched her walk to the front door, her posture straight despite the trembling he knew she must be feeling. She didn't look back. The door opened. Marcus must have been watching, and she disappeared inside. Daniel sat there for a moment longer, the engine idling, wondering if he'd just helped someone find their courage, or simply witnessed another promise that would dissolve in the harsh light of morning. Then his phone buzzed. A text from the number that had been in his phone for exactly 2 hours, the number Elena had insisted on giving him before they'd left the Overlook. "I called. I have an appointment with David Chen at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'm doing this. Thank you for tonight, for everything." Daniel stared at the message, something tight and painful and hopeful expanding in his chest. He drove home slowly, through streets where Los Angeles's dreamers and desperate alike slept or didn't sleep, hoped or didn't hope. He thought about courage and compromise, about the life he'd built for Mia from the wreckage of the life he'd planned for himself. When he finally pulled into his apartment complex at 1:15 a.m., his sister was waiting on his doorstep, her expression a mixture of worry and frustration. "She's asleep in your bed," his sister said without preamble. "She waited up as long as she could." "What happened, Danny? This is the 4th time this month." "I know," Daniel said quietly. "I'm sorry. There was an emergency at work." "There's always an emergency at work," his sister countered. "You're killing yourself for this job, for this man who treats you like you're disposable. When are you going to put yourself first? Put Mia first?" Daniel thought about Elena, about the decision she'd made tonight to stop choosing fear over freedom. "Soon," he promised. "Soon." His sister studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Get some sleep, Danny. You look exhausted." After she left, Daniel stood in the doorway of his small bedroom, watching Mia sleep. She'd kicked off the covers as usual, her homework spread across the foot of the bed, a half-finished drawing of a humpback whale on his pillow. He carefully gathered the papers, set them on the nightstand, pulled the covers over his daughter's thin shoulders. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about ocean currents, then settled back into sleep. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his whole body heavy with exhaustion and something else, something that felt almost like hope. Tomorrow, Elena would walk into David Chen's office. Tomorrow, she would start the hard, terrifying work of reclaiming her life. And tomorrow, Daniel thought, maybe he would start doing the same. But tonight, he was just a father sitting in the dark, watching his daughter dream of whales and wide oceans, grateful for this small, imperfect life they'd built together. Tonight, that was enough. The morning after arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight slicing through Daniel's apartment windows like an accusation. He'd managed 3 hours of sleep, maybe less, his dreams a tangle of dark overlooks and diamond necklaces, and a voice asking him why he stayed when staying meant disappearing. Mia was already awake when he stumbled into the kitchen, her cereal bowl empty, her backpack packed with the military precision she'd developed living with a father who ran perpetually late. She looked up from her whale drawing, her dark eyes, so much like his own, assessing him with the careful concern of a child who'd learned too young to read adult moods. "You look tired, Dad." "I'm okay, sweetheart." Daniel poured coffee he didn't taste, the bitter heat more ritual than sustenance. "Did you finish your geography homework?" "Last night. Aunt Lisa helped me with the capital cities." Mia hesitated, her pencil hovering over the humpback whale she'd been shading. "She said you had an emergency at work again." The careful neutrality in her voice gutted him. 11 years old and already learning to swallow disappointment, to make herself smaller to accommodate his failures. "I did," Daniel said, sitting across from her at their small kitchen table. "And I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you. That's not fair to you." "It's okay." Mia returned to her drawing, but her shoulders had tensed. "Your job is important." "You're more important," Daniel said firmly. "Nothing is more important than you. I need you to know that." Mia looked up then, and something in her expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or the tentative hope that comes from hearing words you've desperately needed to hear. "Really?" "Really." Daniel reached across the table, covering her small hand with his. "I promise, Mia, things are going to change." He meant it. He didn't know how yet, didn't know what shape that change would take. But sitting there with his daughter in their modest kitchen, Daniel felt the same resolve he'd seen forming in Elena's eyes the night before. Fear was exhausting. Living in fear was unsustainable. Something had to give. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Office, 9 a.m., need to discuss last night." Daniel's stomach dropped. Mia noticed his expression change. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Daniel lied, then caught himself. "Actually, work stuff. My boss wants to meet with me." He forced a smile. "But that's my problem, not yours. Come on, let's get you to school." The drive to Mia's middle school took 15 minutes through morning traffic that seemed designed to test human patience. They listened to her favorite podcast about ocean conservation, and Mia chattered about an upcoming field trip to the aquarium that Daniel had already mentally calculated he couldn't afford, but would somehow make happen anyway. When he pulled up to the school entrance, Mia unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately leave. She turned to him, her expression serious beyond her years. "Dad? Whatever happens at work today, it'll be okay. We always figure it out, right?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Right. We always figure it out." She hugged him quickly, fiercely, then grabbed her backpack and disappeared into the stream of students flowing toward the school entrance. Daniel watched until she was inside. Safe within walls he couldn't always be present in, learning lessons he couldn't always help with. Then he drove toward his own reckoning, the morning sun harsh and unforgiving against the windshield. Marcus Rhodes occupied the top floor of a steel and glass tower in Century City, his corner office offering panoramic views of Los Angeles sprawling toward the Pacific. Daniel had been in that office hundreds of times over 6 years, delivering reports and scheduling meetings and managing the 1,000 small details that kept Marcus's empire running smoothly. He'd never been summoned at 9 in the morning with a text that cold. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt interminable. Daniel shared the ascending space with other office workers, all of them dressed in business casual armor, all of them wearing expressions of determined optimism that barely concealed their exhaustion. This was the face of modern survival, Daniel thought. Smile and grind and pretend the grind wasn't killing you slowly. Marcus's executive assistant, Jennifer, a woman in her 50s who'd perfected the art of professional discretion, looked up as Daniel approached. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Daniel caught the flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "He's waiting for you," she said quietly. "Good luck." Daniel nodded, straightened his shoulders, and walked into Marcus Rhodes's domain. The office was exactly as Daniel remembered. Expensive minimalist furniture, awards and recognitions displayed with calculated humility, photographs of Marcus with various celebrities and politicians, and that portrait of Elena wearing emerald green and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door, his posture radiating the controlled authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He was 53, silver-haired and fit from personal trainers and private nutritionists, dressed in a suit that cost more than Daniel earned in a month. "Close the door, Carter." Daniel obeyed, the soft click of the latch sounding final. Marcus turned, and Daniel saw immediately that this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an execution. The question was whether it would be quick or slow. "My wife came home last night at 12:23 a.m., Marcus said, his voice deceptively calm. "I had finished my meetings at 11:47. I was home by midnight. She arrived 23 minutes later, looking upset. When I asked about the delay, she said traffic. When I asked if you'd driven her straight home, she hesitated. Then she said yes." Marcus moved to his desk, leaning against it with studied casualness. "But Elena is a terrible liar. Always has been. She lacks the necessary selfishness to lie convincingly. So I checked the Mercedes' GPS log this morning." Daniel's pulse hammered, but he kept his expression neutral. "You drove to an overlook in Griffith Park," Marcus continued. "Stayed there for 47 minutes, then drove her home." He paused. "Want to tell me what you and my wife were doing in a parked car for 47 minutes, Carter?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. "We talked," Daniel said evenly. "You talked." Marcus's smile was cold. "About what exactly?" "That's between her and me." It was the wrong answer. Daniel knew it the moment the words left his mouth. But the alternative, throwing Elena to this man's calculated cruelty, was unthinkable. Marcus's expression hardened. "Let me be very clear about something, Carter. Elena is my wife. Not your friend. Not your confidant. Mine. And you are my employee. An employee I've paid generously, given flexibility for your personal circumstances, allowed to work reasonable hours so you could handle your single-parent responsibilities. I've been good to you, haven't I?" "Yes, c'était," Daniel admitted. "And in return, I expect loyalty, discretion, boundaries." Marcus pushed off the desk, moving closer. "Taking my wife to a dark overlook and spending 47 minutes talking about things that are between you and her is not loyalty, Carter. It's betrayal. She needed someone to listen. She needed to come home," Marcus snapped. "She needed to smile and go to bed and wake up the next morning and continue being Elena Rhodes, not Elena, whatever she was before she married me. That's her job. That's what she signed up for when she took my ring and my name and my money." The contempt in his voice was breathtaking. This was how Marcus truly saw his wife, as property acquired, a contract executed, a role to be performed. "She's a person," Daniel said quietly. "Not a job description." Marcus laughed, sharp and humorless. "Is that what you told her? Is that why she came home looking like she'd made some kind of decision? Is that why she was up until 3 in the morning in that studio I built for her, pulling out old canvases?" So Elena had started already. The thought sent something fierce and bright through Daniel's chest. "I told her the truth," Daniel said, "that she deserves better than being erased." The silence that followed was dangerous. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You're fired, Carter. Effective immediately. Jennifer will process your severance, 2 weeks' pay, more generosity than you've earned. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal items." Daniel had known this was coming. had known it from the moment he'd chosen to drive Elena to that overlook instead of straight to her gilded cage. But hearing it aloud still felt like falling. "And Carter," Marcus continued, "if I ever hear that you've contacted my wife again, if I ever see your name in her phone records or her email or anywhere near her life, I will make sure you never work in this city again. I have friends in every industry. One phone call and you're unhireable. Do you understand?" Daniel understood perfectly. This was Marcus's world, money and power and connections used as weapons against anyone who dared disrupt his carefully controlled narrative. "I understand," Daniel said. "Good." Marcus turned back to the windows, dismissing Daniel with the gesture. "Tell Jennifer I need her to start interviewing your replacement today. I want someone competent by Monday." Daniel walked to the door, his hand on the handle, his entire future crumbling in real time. Then he stopped. "Marcus? What?" "Elena deserves to be happy, and you'll never give her that no matter how much you try to control her. So yeah, I'm fired. But she's going to leave you anyway, and all your money and all your power won't stop it." He didn't wait for Marcus's response. He walked out, past Jennifer, who'd clearly heard everything through the two thin walls, past the other assistants and junior executives who suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. In his small office, barely more than a closet with a desk, Daniel packed his few personal items into a cardboard box. A photo of Mia at the beach, grinning and holding a starfish. A coffee mug she'd made him in art class, lopsided and perfect. The small succulent plant that had somehow survived 6 years of fluorescent lighting and neglect. This was what he had to show for 6 years of loyal service. A box of memories light enough to carry in one hand. Security arrived, a bored-looking guard named Tom, who'd always been decent to Daniel, and escorted him down 42 floors and out into the late morning sunshine. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, box in hand, unemployed for the first time since Mia had come to live with him full-time. The panic would hit later, he knew. The cold mathematics of rent and utilities and groceries and health insurance, the desperate job search, the interviews, the slow erosion of savings that weren't substantial to begin with. But right now, standing in the California sunshine with his box of belongings, Daniel felt something unexpected. Relief. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to the number Elena had given him. "I'm out. Marcus fired me. Don't let that stop you. Keep going. You've got this." Then he drove home to figure out what the hell he was going to do next. The apartment was quiet when Daniel returned, the kind of silence that amplified every fear he'd been carefully containing. He set the cardboard box on the kitchen table and stared at it, this small collection of his professional life now reduced to items that would fit beside the breakfast cereal. His phone rang, his sister. "Hey, Lisa." "Danny, what's wrong? You never call in the middle of the day." "I didn't call. You called me." "Your voice, I can hear it in your voice. What happened?" Daniel sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "I got fired." The pause on the other end was heavy. Then, "Tell me everything." So he did. He told her about the late-night drive, about Elena and the overlook and the conversation that had unraveled both their carefully maintained facades. He told her about Marcus's cold fury and the GPS logs and the ultimatum. He left out the parts that felt too raw, too personal, the way Elena had looked when she talked about disappearing, the recognition he'd felt in her pain. When he finished, Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "You did the right thing," she finally said. "Did I?" "I have a daughter depending on me, Lisa. I just threw away the best-paying job I've had in years because I couldn't keep my mouth shut." "You helped someone who needed help," Lisa corrected. "You stood up for what was right even though it cost you. That's the kind of father I want Mia to have, the kind of man she should see in you. Being right doesn't pay the rent. No, but it means you can look at yourself in the mirror, and that matters more than you think." Lisa's voice softened. "Danny, you've been dying in that job for years, working for a man who treats you like you're disposable, sacrificing everything, your time, your health, your self-respect, because you thought that's what being a good father meant. But Mia doesn't need you to be a martyr. She needs you to be whole." Daniel pressed his palm against his eyes. "I don't know how to be whole. I only know how to survive." "Then maybe it's time to learn the difference." After they hung up, Daniel sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the afternoon light shifting across the floor. He thought about Elena walking into David Chen's office, about the courage it took to choose uncertainty over comfortable misery. He thought about Mia and the life he wanted to give her, not just stability, but an example of what it meant to make hard choices with integrity. Then he opened his laptop and started searching for jobs. The market was brutal. Every listing required qualifications Daniel either lacked or had let atrophy during 6 years of specialized work for Marcus. Executive assistant positions wanted candidates with specific software expertise. Administrative roles paid barely above minimum wage. Project management jobs required certifications he didn't have. By late afternoon, Daniel had sent out 17 applications and heard back from exactly none. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hello? Daniel Carter. A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes? This is David Chen's office. Ms. Rhodes asked me to call you. She wanted you to know that she came in this morning. She's moving forward with the divorce proceedings. She also wanted me to tell you that what happened with your employment isn't your fault, and these are her exact words, more grateful than she can express. Something in Daniel's chest loosened. Is she okay? She's scared, but she's determined. Mister. Chen thinks she has a strong case. The woman paused. She wanted to call you herself, but her husband has someone monitoring her phone records. It's complicated. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. After the call ended, Daniel allowed himself a moment of pure satisfaction. Elena had done it. Despite her fear, despite Marcus's power, despite every reason to retreat back into the gilded cage, she had chosen herself. If she could do that, Daniel thought, maybe he could too. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of job applications and growing anxiety. By the time Daniel had to pick up Mia from school, he'd applied to 32 positions and received automated rejections from 8. Mia emerged from the school building with her best friend Sophie, both girls laughing about something that apparently involved a substitute teacher and a misunderstanding about marine biology. She hugged Sophie goodbye and climbed into Daniel's aging Honda, her good mood evaporating the moment she saw his face. What happened? Daniel merged into traffic, buying himself a few seconds to figure out how to explain job loss to an 11-year-old. I don't work for Mr. Rhodes anymore. Did you quit? He fired me. Mia absorbed this information silently. Then, because of the emergency last night? Something like that. Dad. Mia's voice had that edge of frustration that reminded Daniel she was almost 12, almost a teenager, too smart to be protected from hard truths. Tell me what actually happened. I'm not a baby. So Daniel told her. A simplified version, leaving out the parts about Elena's pain and Marcus's cruelty, but honest about the core truth. He'd helped someone who needed help, and it had cost him his job. When he finished, Mia was quiet for several blocks. Are we going to be okay? She finally asked, her voice small. Yes, Daniel said firmly. We're going to be okay. It might be tight for a while. I might not be able to get you those new sneakers you wanted, and we'll probably eat a lot of pasta. But we'll figure it out. We always do. I don't need new sneakers, Mia said immediately. My old ones are fine, and I like pasta. Daniel's throat tightened, his daughter already learning to make herself smaller to accommodate his failures. Mia, I'm serious, Dad. It's fine. You helped someone. That's more important than sneakers. She paused. Was it the woman from last night, your boss's wife? Too smart by half. Yes. Was she in trouble? In a way. Mia nodded, processing this. Then you did the right thing. Mom always said you were too nice for your own good, like it was a bad thing. But I think it's good. I think helping people is what you're supposed to do, even when it's hard. Daniel pulled into their apartment complex parking lot and killed the engine. He turned to his daughter, this fierce, compassionate person he'd somehow helped raise, and felt a surge of pride so intense it hurt. When did you get so wise? Mia shrugged. I have a good dad. That night, after Mia had gone to bed with her whale drawings and her library book about ocean currents, Daniel sat at his laptop sending out more applications. His savings would cover maybe 2 months of expenses if he was careful, less if anything unexpected happened, which it inevitably would. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but this time a text. "This is Elena. David Chen gave me a secure number. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. This is my fault." Daniel typed back, "Not your fault, my choice. How are you?" The response came quickly. "Terrified. Hopeful. Moving into a friend's guest house tomorrow while the divorce proceeds. Marcus is furious, but his lawyer says he can't stop me. I started painting again tonight. Just sketches, but still. It felt like breathing after being underwater." "That's good. Keep breathing. Thank you for everything, Daniel, for listening, for not judging, for showing me what courage looks like. You showed yourself. I just witnessed it." A pause, then, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. What are you going to do now?" Daniel stared at the question, at the cursor blinking in the message field, at the vast, uncertain future spread before him like uncharted water. "I don't know yet. But I'm going to figure it out. If you need anything, a reference, help with job search, anything, please let me know. I owe you. You don't owe me anything. Just be happy. That's enough." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "I'm trying. For the first time in years, I'm actually trying." Daniel smiled at his phone screen, at this woman he barely knew but somehow understood completely. That's all any of us can do. The following weeks unfolded with the relentless momentum of consequences. Daniel sent out applications to every administrative position within a 50-mile radius. He had 3 interviews, one for a receptionist job that paid half what Marcus had, one for a logistics coordinator position that required weekend work he couldn't manage with Mia, and one for an executive assistant role at a nonprofit that ultimately hired someone with more recent experience. His savings dwindled. He started buying the cheapest groceries, canceling subscriptions he didn't need, calculating every expense against the shrinking buffer between survival and disaster. Mia noticed, despite his efforts to shield her. She stopped asking for things, started offering to help more around the apartment, suggested they eat cereal for dinner because it was cheaper. His sister loaned him money he had no clear timeline for repaying. His car's check engine light, long ignored, became an ominous rattle that he couldn't afford to diagnose. And through it all, Daniel kept checking his phone for updates from Elena, brief messages that chronicled her own difficult metamorphosis. She'd moved into her friend's guest house. Marcus was fighting the divorce viciously, using every legal tactic his expensive attorneys could devise. But she was painting again, really painting, and had even reached out to a few galleries about showing her work. Each message from her felt like confirmation that the choice had been worth it, even as Daniel's own situation grew more precarious. Then, 5 weeks after being fired, Daniel's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Is this Daniel Carter?" "Yes." "My name is Patricia Williams. I run a family services nonprofit here in Los Angeles. Your resume came across my desk, and I'd like to talk to you about a position we're trying to fill. Would you have time to come in for an interview?" Daniel's heart leapt. "Absolutely. When?" "Tomorrow afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? I'll be there." The nonprofit occupied a modest building in Echo Park, its walls covered with children's artwork and community announcements. Patricia Williams was in her 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the weary compassion of someone who'd spent decades fighting fights that never quite got won. She reviewed Daniel's resume across her cluttered desk, then looked up at him. "You worked for Marcus Rhodes for 6 years." "Yes." "And left why?" Daniel hesitated. He could lie, could frame it as seeking new opportunities or wanting work-life balance. But something about Patricia's direct gaze made him choose honesty. "I was fired. I helped his wife in a difficult situation, and he didn't appreciate it." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Helped her how?" So Daniel told the story again, the short version, watching Patricia's expression shift from curiosity to understanding. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "The position I'm hiring for is program coordinator. You'd be managing our family support services, connecting single parents with resources, organizing community events, handling administrative work. It pays significantly less than what you made with Rhodes. The hours are long, the work is hard, but it matters. Does that interest you? Very much, Daniel said. Why? Because I'm a single parent. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning and everyone else is just watching. If I can help other people in that situation, even a little, that seems like something worth doing. Patricia smiled. When can you start? Daniel started at the nonprofit the following Monday, arriving early to a building that smelled like coffee and hope stretched thin over insufficient funding. His new office was a shared space with two other coordinators, the desk scarred from years of use, the computer older than Mia. But when Patricia handed him his first case file, a single mother of three who'd just lost her housing, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years working for Marcus Rhodes. Purpose. The pay cut was brutal. Daniel had prepared Mia as gently as he could, explaining that they'd need to be more careful with money, that some things would have to wait. She'd listened with that too serious expression she wore when trying to be brave, then hugged him and said she understood. But understanding didn't make the math any easier. After rent and utilities and groceries bought from discount stores, Daniel had roughly $40 a week for everything else. Gas. Mia's school supplies. The small emergencies that weren't emergencies until they were. His first week at the nonprofit blurred past in a cascade of learning, new systems, new protocols, new faces attached to stories that broke his heart daily. Single fathers working 3 jobs and still falling behind. Mothers choosing between medication and food. Families living in cars, in shelters, in the margins of a city that costs more than survival should. Daniel met each person with the same quiet attention he'd given Elena that night, listening without judgment, helping navigate systems designed to exhaust rather than assist. He connected a teenage mother with childcare resources. He helped a laid-off construction worker file for emergency assistance. He sat with a grandmother raising her daughter's children and helped her find a food bank that delivered. It was exhausting. It paid barely enough to survive. And Daniel went home each evening feeling more alive than he had in years. Mia noticed the change in him. On Friday night, over spaghetti with sauce from a jar, she looked at him with those dark, assessing eyes and said, "You're happier." "Am I?" "Yeah. You used to come home from Mr. Rhodes's office looking like you'd been holding your breath all day. Now you just look tired, but like, good tired." Daniel smiled. "Good tired. I like that." "Me too." Mia twirled pasta around her fork. "Sophie's mom asked if we wanted to go to the aquarium with them next weekend. I said I'd ask you, but it's okay if we can't. I know it costs money." The aquarium trip. The one Daniel had been promising for months. The one he'd been planning to surprise her with before everything fell apart. Admission was $35 per person, $70 total, plus parking, plus lunch. Nearly 2 weeks of his emergency buffer. "We'll go," Daniel said. "Dad, you don't have to—" "We'll go," he repeated firmly. "You've been patient and understanding through all of this. You deserve the aquarium." Mia's face lit up, and Daniel committed to making it work, even if it meant eating nothing but rice and beans for a week afterward. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Major development. Marcus's lawyer found irregularities in the prenup. David thinks it might be thrown out entirely. Could change everything about the settlement. Daniel typed back. "That's good news?" "Scary news. If the prenup goes, Marcus will fight harder. But it also means I might actually walk away with enough to start over properly. David says it could take months. You holding up okay?" A pause, then, "Some days? Other days I wake up panicking about whether I made the right choice. Whether I should have just stayed and made it work." "You made the right choice. The panic is just fear. Fear passes." "Does it?" "I'm 33 and starting from nothing. All my friends were Marcus's friends. My family thinks I'm throwing away my life. I'm living in a guest house painting pictures that might never sell. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being selfish." Daniel looked at Mia, at his daughter who'd learned to absorb his stress and make herself smaller to accommodate his struggles. He thought about the families he'd met this week, people trapped in impossible situations by circumstances and choices and systems designed to keep them there. Being selfish would be staying in a situation that was killing you because leaving was inconvenient for other people. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival, and you're allowed to survive. Another pause, longer this time, then, "Thank you. I needed to hear that today. Anytime. How's the new job?" "Hard. Good. I helped a woman find housing today." She cried. It felt important. "You're doing good work, Daniel. So are you. Choosing yourself is good work." That weekend, Daniel took Mia to the aquarium with Sophie and her mother, a friendly woman named Karen who talked enthusiastically about tide pools and didn't seem to notice or care that Daniel's clothes were cheaper than everyone else's. Mia was radiant, pressing her face against the glass of the shark tank, asking questions about migration patterns and conservation efforts, her joy so pure it physically hurt to witness. Walking through the dimly lit tunnels with fish swimming overhead, Mia grabbed Daniel's hand. "This is the best day," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, thank you, Dad." Daniel squeezed her hand, the $70 suddenly feeling like the best investment he'd ever made. On the drive home, Mia fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from excitement. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror, at her peaceful face, and felt the familiar weight of single parenthood settle over him, that constant calculation of what he could provide versus what she deserved. The gap between those two things, a persistent ache. His phone buzzed at a red light. Another text from Elena. "I did something terrifying today." "What?" "Reached out to the gallery owner who showed my work 7 years ago. Asked if she'd look at my new paintings. She said yes. I'm meeting her Tuesday." "That's amazing. That's terrifying. What if she hates them? What if I'm not any good anymore?" "Then you paint more and get better, but you won't know unless you try." "When did you become so wise?" Daniel smiled at his phone. "Somewhere between getting fired and learning to eat ramen 4 nights a week. I'm sorry. About the ramen. Don't be. I chose this, and I'd choose it again." He meant it. Driving home through Los Angeles traffic with his sleeping daughter in the back seat, Daniel felt a certainty he hadn't experienced in years. The path forward was unclear, the money was tight, the future was uncertain, but it was his uncertainty, his choice, his life lived according to values he could defend to himself in the mirror. That counted for something. The following Tuesday, Daniel was at his desk navigating bureaucratic labyrinths for a client when Patricia appeared in his doorway. "Got a minute?" "Of course." Patricia settled into the chair across from him, her expression serious. "I need to talk to you about something. A woman called this morning asking about you, said she was referred by someone you'd helped recently and wanted to know if you were available for private consulting." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Consulting for what?" "Family crisis management, apparently. She's going through a difficult divorce, needs help coordinating logistics, finding resources, managing the practical aspects while her lawyer handles the legal side. She's willing to pay well. Really well." "Who is she?" "She didn't give her name, just a callback number." Patricia slid a Post-it note across the desk. "Daniel, if you want to take private clients on the side, I understand. Lord knows we don't pay enough here, but I need to know you're still committed to this position." "I am," Daniel said immediately. "Completely. This is the work I want to do." Patricia studied him, then nodded. "Okay, then call her back or don't, your choice. But if you do take it, just make sure it doesn't interfere with your responsibilities here." After Patricia left, Daniel stared at the phone number. Something felt off. The timing was too convenient, the offer too perfect. He pulled out his phone and called the number from his personal cell. A woman answered on the second ring. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Victoria Brennan. I'm a friend of Elena Rhodes. She suggested I reach out to you." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Elena sent you?" "Indirectly. She mentioned in conversation that you'd helped her navigate some difficult decisions and that you'd recently started working with families in crisis. I'm in a similar situation, leaving a marriage, need help coordinating the practical aspects, someone who understands both the logistics and the emotional complexity." "And you're willing to pay for this help?" "Generously. $5,000 for the month, maybe more if the situation extends beyond that. I know it's unusual, but I'm desperate and Elena spoke very highly of you." $5,000. More than Daniel made in 2 months at the nonprofit. Enough to refill his savings, fix his car, buy Mia the things she needed without calculating every dollar. But something still felt wrong. Miss Brennan, can I ask you something? Of course. Did Marcus Rhodes send you? The pause was infinitesimal, but Daniel caught it. Why would you think that? Because this feels like a test or a trap, and I'd rather know now than find out later. Another pause, longer this time. Then Victoria Brennan laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Elena said you were perceptive. She was right. So Marcus did send you. Not exactly. I'm Marcus's attorney's wife. He asked me to reach out, see if you were the type to take money to compromise your principles. I told him it was a terrible idea, but he insisted. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This is beneath both of us. Daniel closed his eyes. Tell Marcus I said no. And tell him to leave me alone. I will. And Daniel, Elena really did speak highly of you. Whatever you did for her, it mattered. The call ended, leaving Daniel staring at his desk, his hands shaking slightly. Marcus was still watching, still testing, still trying to exert control even after Elena had left. The thought was infuriating and oddly validating. If Marcus was this invested in discrediting Daniel, it meant Elena's choice had genuinely threatened him. Good. That evening, Daniel texted Elena. Got an interesting call today. Marcus's attorney's wife offering me money to compromise myself. Her response was immediate. What? I had nothing to do with that, I swear. I know. I turned it down. Just thought you should know he's still playing games. He's escalating. The prenup hearing is next week. His lawyers are getting desperate. I'm sorry he's dragging you into this. Not your fault. How are you holding up? Barely. The gallery owner loved my new work. Wants to include 3 pieces in a group show next month. I should be thrilled, but I'm just terrified. Terrified is normal. You're doing something that matters. Fear comes with that territory. I wish I was as brave as you think I am. You are. You left. That took more courage than anything I've done. You gave up a stable job to help someone you barely knew. That's pretty brave too. Daniel smiled at his phone. Maybe we're both braver than we think. Maybe. Daniel? Yeah. When this is over, when the divorce is final and the dust settles, can we get coffee? Just talk like normal people instead of 2 disasters texting in the dark? Daniel's chest tightened. He thought about Mia, about the careful balance he maintained between work and parenthood. He thought about the complications inherent in any relationship between 2 people rebuilding from wreckage. He thought about all the reasons getting coffee with Elena Rhodes was probably a terrible idea. Then he typed, I'd like that. The prenup hearing happened on a Thursday morning. Daniel knew because Elena had texted him the night before, a message that simply said, tomorrow everything changes. Wish me luck. He'd responded, you don't need luck. You have truth on your side. That's stronger. Now sitting at his desk trying to focus on work while checking his phone every few minutes, Daniel felt the strange weight of invested hope. He barely knew Elena Rhodes beyond a few hours of conversation and weeks of sporadic texts. But her freedom felt entangled with his own somehow, proof that choosing integrity over comfort could lead somewhere worth going. His phone finally buzzed at 2:47 p.m. The prenup is void. Judge said it was signed under duress. Marcus's lawyers didn't follow proper protocols. We go to full divorce proceedings now. Could take months, but David says I have a real shot at a fair settlement. That's incredible. I'm shaking. Marcus looked like he wanted to kill someone. His lead attorney tried to argue, but the judge shut him down. It was terrifying and wonderful, and I can't believe it actually happened. Believe it. You did this. We did this. If you hadn't listened that night, if you hadn't told me I deserved better, I'd still be in that house disappearing slowly. You saved my life, Daniel. You saved your own life. I just witnessed it. That night, Daniel took Mia out for pizza to celebrate. He didn't tell her exactly what they were celebrating, just that something good had happened to someone who deserved good things. Mia, perceptive as always, didn't ask for details. She just enjoyed the pizza and told him about her science project and seemed content in the small moment of normalcy. Walking back to their apartment under the Los Angeles evening sky, Mia said, Dad, are you dating the woman you helped? Daniel nearly tripped. What? No, why would you think that? You've been texting someone a lot. You smile when you read the messages, and you seem happier lately, even though we're broke. Mia shrugged. It's okay if you are. Dating, I mean. You're allowed to be happy too. I'm not dating anyone, Charles, Daniel said carefully. She's just a friend going through a hard time. But you like her. It wasn't a question. Daniel considered lying, then remembered his commitment to honesty with his daughter. I don't know her well enough to know what I feel, but yes, I like who she seems to be, and I admire her courage. Mia nodded, processing this. When you do start dating, not her necessarily, but someday, I want to meet them first. Make sure they're good enough for you. Daniel's throat tightened. Deal. And they have to like whales. That's non-negotiable, Daniel agreed solemnly. The divorce proceedings stretched across October and into November, each week bringing new developments that Elena relayed through their increasingly frequent messages. Marcus fought every detail viciously, using delay tactics and legal maneuvering to drag out the process. But Elena held firm, supported by David Chen's methodical building of her case. Meanwhile, Daniel settled into his new life with surprising ease. The nonprofit work was demanding but fulfilling. Each small victory, a family housed, a child enrolled in school, a parent connected with job training, felt significant in ways that scheduling Marcus's meetings never had. Patricia promoted him to senior coordinator after 2 months, a title that came with slightly more responsibility and barely more money but felt like genuine recognition. His relationship with Mia deepened through their shared adversity. They developed rituals, Friday night movie nights with popcorn made on the stove, Sunday morning walks to the farmer's market where they'd buy whatever vegetables were cheapest and plan creative meals around them, quiet evenings where she'd draw her whales and he'd read case files and they'd exist companionably in their small space. I like this better, Mia said one night in late November, apropos of nothing. Like what better? This life. When you worked for Mr. Rhodes, you were always stressed and gone. Now you're here more. And yeah, we're broke, but we're together. That's better. Daniel pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of an almost 12-year-old who'd figured out what he'd taken years to learn. That same week, Elena's divorce finally moved toward resolution. Marcus's attorneys, recognizing their weakening position, pushed for settlement negotiations. David Chen was cautiously optimistic. They're offering enough for me to buy a small place and live modestly for a few years while I rebuild my career, Elena texted. David thinks I could push for more, but I just want it over. I want to move forward. What do you want to do? Take the settlement. Buy a little studio apartment somewhere affordable. Paint. Build a life that's actually mine. Is that enough? It's everything. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks before Christmas. Elena got significantly less than half of Marcus's wealth, but enough to start over without desperation hanging over every choice. She got her freedom, her name back. Her life returned. Daniel got a text at 4:23 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's done. I'm officially divorced. Officially Elena Petrov again. Officially terrified and free. He stepped outside the nonprofit building into the December afternoon, the California winter mild and bright, and called her. She answered on the first ring. Hi. Hi. Congratulations. Elena laughed, and it sounded different than before. Lighter, more genuine. Is that what you say to someone who just ended their marriage? When the marriage was ending them? Yes. Fair point. He heard her take a shaky breath. I did it, Daniel. I actually did it. You did. I'm completely broke by rich people's standards. I'm living in a guest house. My ex-husband hates me. Half my old friends won't speak to me, and I feel better than I have in 7 years. That's called being alive, Daniel said softly. Sometimes it's messy, but it's real. Remember you said we could get coffee when this was over? Daniel's heart rate picked up. I remember. Is the offer still good? He thought about all the reasons this was complicated. The way they'd met, the asymmetry of their situations, the fact that they'd both been through significant trauma and might just be seeking comfort in familiar wreckage. He thought about Mia's requirement that she meet anyone he dated, about his financial situation, about the 1,000 practical obstacles between this moment and anything resembling a relationship. Then he said, yes, the offer's still good. Saturday? There's a coffee shop in Silver Lake I used to go to before everything. I'd like to see if it's still there. Saturday works. After they hung up, Daniel stood on the sidewalk watching Los Angeles traffic flow past, feeling the weight of anticipation he hadn't allowed himself in years. This wasn't rescue. Neither of them were saving each other. They were just two people who'd survived their own storms, considering the possibility of building something new on steadier ground. That night, he told Mia about the coffee date, watching her carefully for any sign of distress. She listened, then said, "The woman from that night? The one you helped?" "Yes." "Is she nice?" "I think so. I don't know her well yet." Mia considered this. "Does she like whales?" "I don't know. I'll ask." "Okay, but I still want to meet her eventually, if it becomes a thing." "Deal." Saturday arrived cold and bright, the kind of December morning that made Los Angeles feel almost seasonal. Daniel dropped Mia at her friend Sophie's house for a sleepover, endured Sophie's mother's knowing smile, and drove to Silver Lake with his stomach in knots. The coffee shop was small and worn, the kind of place that had probably been there for decades, outlasting trends through sheer, stubborn existence. Elena was already there, sitting at a corner table, and Daniel almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair shorter, the severe elegance replaced with something softer, more natural. She wore jeans and a paint-stained sweater, no makeup that Daniel could detect, no jewelry except small silver earrings. She looked younger than she had that night in the Mercedes, more herself, like someone gradually emerging from a long disguise. She saw him and smiled, and Daniel felt something shift in his chest. He ordered coffee, plain, black, all he could afford, and joined her at the table. "Hi," Elena said. "Hi." They stared at each other for a moment, and then both laughed at the awkwardness of it. "This is weird, right?" Elena said. "We've texted for months, but this feels like a first meeting." "It kind of is," Daniel agreed. "We've never actually had a conversation where one of us wasn't in crisis." "True." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "So, non-crisis conversation. How's your daughter?" "Good. She made me promise to ask if you like whales." Elena blinked. "Whales? It's apparently a deal breaker. She's very serious about marine life." "I love whales," Elena said solemnly. "Tell her gray whales are my favorite. They migrate thousands of miles every year, always coming home." "She'll appreciate that." Daniel paused. "She knows about you, that we're meeting. She wants to meet you eventually, if this becomes something." "Does it scare you, the idea of it becoming something?" Daniel considered lying, then chose honesty. "Terrifies me. I haven't dated anyone since my divorce. I'm broke. I work too much. I have a daughter who has to come first in every decision. I'm not exactly a great prospect. I'm a recently divorced woman living in a guest house trying to restart an art career at 33, Elena countered. "I have trust issues and anxiety, and I still wake up sometimes panicking that I made a terrible mistake. I'm not exactly a great prospect either." "So we're both disasters. Disasters who chose to be disasters rather than stay comfortable and miserable," Elena corrected. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "That night, in the car, when you told me I deserved better? Nobody had ever said that to me before. My parents thought I was lucky to marry Marcus. My friends envied my lifestyle. Everyone told me I had everything, but you saw me for maybe an hour and recognized that I was dying. That meant everything." Daniel's throat was tight. "I recognized it because I'd been there. Different circumstances, same drowning." "Are you still drowning?" "No," Daniel said. "I'm swimming now, slowly, sometimes barely, but moving forward." Elena finally closed the distance, her hand covering his. Her skin was warm, paint-stained at the cuticles. "Me too." They talked for 3 hours, the conversation flowing with surprising ease once the initial awkwardness passed. Elena told him about her paintings, about the gallery show that had sold 2 of her 3 pieces, about the small studio apartment she'd found in Echo Park. Daniel told her about his work at the nonprofit, about Mia's marine biology obsessions, about the strange satisfaction of building a life with integrity even when it cost more than he could easily afford. Neither of them made promises. Neither of them defined what this was or could become. They just talked like 2 people getting to know each other, finding common ground in shared survival. When Daniel finally checked his phone, it was past noon. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "I have to pick up Mia at 5. "Okay." Elena stood with him. Outside the coffee shop, the afternoon sun was gentle. "Can we do this again?" "Yes. And maybe next time I could meet Mia, if that's not too fast." Daniel thought about his daughter's fierce protectiveness, her determination to make sure anyone in his life was worthy. "She'd like that. Maybe somewhere she can interrogate you properly about whales." Elena laughed. "The aquarium? Perfect." They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to leave. Then Elena stepped forward and hugged him, quick and warm and gone, before Daniel could fully process it. "Thank you," she said, "for that night, for every conversation since, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Thank you for being brave enough to act on it," Daniel responded. Driving home, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years: anticipation untainted by anxiety, hope grounded in reality rather than desperation. He and Elena were both broken in different ways, both rebuilding from wreckage. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the people best equipped to build something lasting were the ones who'd already survived their own demolitions and knew exactly how much strength reconstruction required. His phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Elena. "Does Mia know gray whales can hold their breath for up to 15 minutes? I'm preparing my credentials." Daniel smiled at his phone and typed back, "You're going to do great." And somehow, inexplicably, he believed it. The aquarium trip happened 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning that arrived with unexpected rain, rare for Los Angeles in December, the drops speckling the windshield as Daniel drove to pick up Elena from her new studio apartment in Echo Park. Mia sat in the back seat, unusually quiet, her fingers drumming against her knee in a rhythm Daniel recognized as nerves. "You okay back there?" he asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "What if she doesn't like me? She's gonna love you. What if I don't like her?" Daniel pulled up to a red light and turned to face his daughter fully. "Then you tell me and we figure it out together. Your opinion matters most here, Mia. You know that, right?" Mia nodded, but the anxiety didn't leave her face. Sophie's mom got a boyfriend last year, and Sophie hated him, and her mom married him anyway, and now Sophie has to see him every day and pretend it's fine. Daniel's chest tightened. The weight children carried, the ways they absorbed and anticipated adult failures. "I'm not Sophie's mom. If you don't like Elena, we don't move forward. Period. You come first. Always." "Promise?" "Promise." Elena was waiting outside her building when they arrived, holding an umbrella decorated with painted sunflowers, wearing jeans and a blue raincoat that made her look younger than her 33 years. She climbed into the passenger seat with a nervous smile, water droplets clinging to her short hair. "Hi," she said to Daniel, then turned to the back seat. "You must be Mia. I've heard so much about you." Mia regarded Elena with the solemn assessment of a child who'd learned to be cautious. "Dad says you like gray whales." "I do. They're incredible migrators. Did you know they travel up to 12,000 miles every year between feeding and breeding grounds?" 12,430 miles, Mia corrected. "I looked it up." Elena's smile widened, genuine and delighted. "You're absolutely right. I should have been more precise." Something in Mia's posture softened fractionally. "Do you know about their communication patterns?" "Not as much as I'd like to. Tell me." And just like that, Mia launched into an enthusiastic explanation of whale songs and acoustic signals, her nervousness dissolving into the passion she carried for anything ocean-related. Elena listened with focused attention, asking questions that proved she was actually engaged rather than just performing interest, and Daniel felt the tight knot in his chest begin to loosen. The aquarium was crowded despite the rain, families and couples moving through the dimly lit exhibits with reverent quiet. Daniel bought their tickets, a financial hit that he'd carefully budgeted for, and they entered the blue-tinted world of marine life together. Mia immediately took charge, pulling them toward the kelp forest exhibit with the authority of someone who'd memorized the aquarium map weeks ago. She positioned herself and Elena in front of the massive tank, pointing out leopard sharks and Garibaldi fish, explaining their behaviors with encyclopedic detail. Elena listened like Mia was the most fascinating person she'd ever met. "Your daughter is brilliant," Elena said quietly to Daniel as Mia pressed her face against the glass, tracking a sea turtle's lazy swimming. She is, Daniel agreed. She's also terrified you're going to break my heart. Elena's expression shifted, something raw and honest moving across her features. I'm terrified of that too. I've never been in a healthy relationship, Daniel. I don't know how to do this without the controlling and the performing and the slow erasure. What if I hurt you without meaning to? What if I'm too damaged to be good for either of you? What if you're not? Daniel countered. What if we're both just people trying to do better than we've done before and that's enough? Before Elena could respond, Mia returned, grabbing Elena's hand with unselfconscious ease. Come on, the jellyfish exhibit is this way. You have to see it. They moved through the aquarium in a strange new constellation, father, daughter, and this woman who was becoming something Daniel didn't quite have words for yet. In the jellyfish room, bathed in ethereal blue and pink light, Mia explained bioluminescence while Elena asked questions that demonstrated she was actually learning, not just placating. Daniel hung back slightly, watching them together, and felt the dangerous flutter of hope that this might actually work. Later, in the cafeteria over overpriced fish and chips, Mia fixed Elena with a serious look and said, "Can I ask you something? Anything. Why do you like my dad?" Elena didn't laugh or deflect. She set down her fork and gave Mia the same focused attention she'd given to whale migration patterns. Because he's kind and honest and brave in ways that matter more than the ways people usually talk about bravery. What do you mean? Most people think bravery is big dramatic things, like soldiers or firefighters, and that's brave, absolutely. But your dad's brave in a different way. He helps people when it costs him something. He chooses what's right over what's easy. He loves you enough to build a whole life around making sure you're okay. Elena paused. And he listened to me when I needed someone to hear me. That sounds small, but it changed my life. Mia absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. He's a good dad. He's a very good dad. Are you going to hurt him? The directness of the question made Daniel's breath catch, but Elena didn't flinch. I'm going to try very hard not to, but I've been hurt badly, and sometimes hurt people hurt other people without meaning to. If I ever do something that upsets you or your dad, I want you to tell me, okay? Because I'd rather know and fix it than have you both quietly suffering. Okay, Mia said, and something in the way she said it suggested Elena had passed some invisible test. They spent another hour at the aquarium, eventually finding themselves in the shark tunnel with predators gliding overhead in hypnotic patterns. Mia had wandered ahead to read an information placard, leaving Daniel and Elena standing side by side in the blue-tinged darkness. She's incredible, Elena said softly. You've raised someone genuinely special. We've raised each other, Daniel corrected. I don't think I'd have survived the last few years without her. She gives me a reason to keep going when everything else feels impossible. That's a lot of weight for a child to carry. I know. I try not to burden her with my struggles, but she sees everything. She's too perceptive for her own good sometimes. Daniel glanced at Elena. What did you think? Honestly, is this too complicated? Too much too fast? Elena watched the sharks circle overhead, silent and ancient and beautiful in their efficient danger. I think complicated is better than simple and hollow. I think too much is better than not enough. And I think too fast is only a problem if we're running away from something instead of toward something. Which are we doing? I don't know yet, Elena admitted, but I'd like to find out. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure out how to be in a relationship without losing myself in it. I'm willing, Daniel said, if you're willing to be patient with me while I figure out how to let someone in without feeling like I'm neglecting my daughter. Deal, Mia returned then, sliding between them to point at a particularly large shark. That's a 7-gill shark. They're rare in captivity. We're lucky to see one. Daniel put his arm around his daughter, and when Elena moved slightly closer so their shoulders touched, it felt less like a beginning and more like a careful continuation of something that had started that night in the Mercedes. Two people learning to trust themselves enough to trust each other. The following weeks unfolded with careful deliberation. Elena and Daniel saw each other once or twice a week, always including Mia, building familiarity through shared experiences rather than romantic intensity. They went to museums and parks, and once to a documentary about deep-sea exploration that Mia loved, and both adults found slightly boring but pretended to enjoy for her sake. Elena showed them her studio apartment, small but filled with light and canvases in various states of completion. Mia studied the paintings with serious attention, finally pronouncing them really good actually, which Elena seemed to understand was high praise. Daniel showed Elena his world too, the nonprofit where he worked, the modest apartment he shared with Mia, the carefully constructed life built from necessity and determination. Elena didn't flinch at the smallness of it, didn't compare it to what she'd left behind. She just fit into it, comfortable in ways that suggested she'd been waiting for permission to exist simply. But not everything was easy. 3 weeks into their careful courtship, Daniel got a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Daniel Carter?" A man's voice, cultured and cold. "Yes?" "Marcus Rhodes? I think we need to have a conversation." Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. "I have nothing to say to you." "But I have something to say to you. You cost me my marriage. You poisoned my wife against me. Your wife poisoned herself against you," Daniel interrupted. "I just witnessed it, and she's not your wife anymore." "You smug little—" Marcus caught himself, his breathing audible. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Elena was fine before you filled her head with nonsense about deserving better. She had everything, security, status, a life most women would kill for." "She had a prison," Daniel said quietly. "And she chose freedom. That's not my doing, that's hers. She chose poverty. She chose uncertainty. She's living in a glorified closet painting pictures nobody wants. That's the future you helped her choose." "She chose herself," Daniel corrected, "and I'd make the same choice again." Marcus's laugh was ugly. "Noble of you. Very noble. Tell me, Carter, how's that nobility treating you financially? Still working at that pathetic nonprofit? Still driving that piece of shit car? Still living paycheck to paycheck with a daughter who deserves better than what you can provide?" The words hit harder than they should have, targeting every insecurity Daniel carried. "Mia has everything she needs," Daniel said, but his voice had lost its steadiness. "Does she? Or does she have a father who gave up a stable career to play white knight for a woman who isn't even your problem? You had a good position with me, Carter. Security for your daughter. And you threw it away for what? Principles? How much are those principles worth when your kid needs braces or college tuition or any of the 1,000 things that cost money you don't have?" Daniel wanted to hang up, should have hung up, but Marcus had found the exposed nerve and was pressing it with surgical precision. "Why are you calling me?" Daniel asked. "Because I want you to understand something. You didn't save Elena. You didn't rescue her from some terrible fate. You convinced a confused woman to blow up a perfectly functional marriage because of your own damaged perspective on relationships. Your marriage failed, Carter. You couldn't keep your wife happy, couldn't provide the life she wanted, and now you're projecting that failure onto my marriage. Elena will realize that eventually. She'll realize she traded security for struggle, and she'll resent you for it. They always do." The call ended, leaving Daniel staring at his phone in the quiet of his apartment, Marcus's words echoing in the silence. He didn't tell Elena about the call, didn't mention it to anyone. But that night, lying awake while Mia slept in the next room, Daniel felt the old familiar anxiety creeping back. What if Marcus was right? What if Daniel had projected his own failures onto Elena's situation? What if his encouragement had cost her more than freedom was worth? The doubts accumulated like snow, quiet and persistent. By morning, Daniel had convinced himself that he needed to pull back. For Elena's sake, for Mia's, for everyone's. He texted Elena. "Can we talk?" They met at the same Silver Lake coffee shop where they'd had their first non-crisis conversation. Elena arrived looking worried, clearly sensing something wrong in the brevity of his message. "What's going on?" she asked before even sitting down. Daniel had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but facing her across the small table, the words tangled themselves into inadequacy. "I've been thinking about us, about whether this is fair to you." Elena's expression shifted, guarded now. "Fair to me how?" "You just got out of a controlling relationship. You're rebuilding your life. And here I am, this broke single dad who can barely keep his own head above water. What if you're just seeking stability with me because I'm safe? What if in a year or two you realize you traded one limitation for another? Is that really what you're worried about? Elena's voice was carefully controlled. Or did Marcus call you? Daniel's head snapped up. How did you? Because he called me too, yesterday. Told me I was making a mistake, that I'd end up broke and desperate, that you were damaged goods dragging me down to your level. Elena leaned forward, her eyes intense. Is that what this is? He got in your head and now you're sabotaging us before we even have a chance? I'm trying to protect you. From what? From making my own choices? Elena's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from other patrons. She lowered it, but the intensity remained. Daniel, I spent 7 years with someone who thought he knew better than me what I needed. I left that. I fought for months to leave that. I'm not looking for someone else to make my decisions for me, even if those decisions are supposedly for my own good. But what if he's right? What if you do regret this? Then I regret it, Elena said fiercely. Then I learn from it and move forward. But it'll be my regret, my choice, my life. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Daniel. Nobody does except me. The words landed like a slap, shocking in their clarity. I'm sorry, Daniel said quietly. You're right. I'm doing exactly what I criticized Marcus for. I'm trying to control the narrative to protect myself from getting hurt. Are you? Elena's expression softened slightly. Or are you trying to protect me? Both, probably. Okay, that's honest. Elena reached across the table, her hand palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Can I tell you what I actually need from you? Daniel placed his hand in hers. Please. I need you to trust that I know my own mind. I need you to believe that I chose this, chose you, chose us, chose the possibility of something real, with full awareness of what it means. Yes, you're broke. Yes, you have a daughter who comes first. Yes, this is complicated. But I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from complexity. I'm a grown woman who spent years being underestimated and controlled. And I need you to see me as capable of making hard choices. I do see you that way, Daniel protested. Then act like it, Elena said. Stop trying to save me from decisions I'm making with open eyes. If this doesn't work out, if we try and fail, that's okay. Failure is part of growth. But let's fail honestly if we're going to fail, not because you preemptively decided I couldn't handle the reality of your life. Daniel sat with that, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. He'd been so focused on protecting Elena from potential regret that he'd failed to honor her agency in choosing him despite, or maybe because of, his circumstances. I'm scared, he admitted, of hurting you, of Mia getting attached and then losing you, of not being enough. I'm scared too, Elena said, of falling back into old patterns, of losing myself again, of discovering I don't know how to love someone without disappearing. She squeezed his hand, but I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and empty. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked across the table, two people who'd learned the hard way that safety without authenticity was just another form of prison. Marcus was wrong, Daniel finally said, about you regretting this, about me projecting my failures. He was trying to get in my head because he can't stand that you chose something he can't control. He was also partially right, Elena said. You did influence my decision to leave, but not because you poisoned me against him. You just reminded me that I used to have a self-worth protecting. That's not manipulation. That's witnessing. So where does that leave us? Elena smiled, small but genuine. Moving forward, carefully, honestly, with the understanding that we're both going to mess up sometimes because we're human and damaged and trying, but we talk about it instead of making decisions for each other. Deal? Deal. They stayed at the coffee shop for another hour, talking through the fears Marcus's call had activated, establishing boundaries and expectations, building the foundation for something that could maybe withstand the weight of their respective histories. When they finally left, stepping out into the California afternoon, Elena stopped on the sidewalk. I need to tell you something. Okay. The gallery sold another one of my paintings, for enough that I can actually afford my rent for the next few months without panic. I'm starting to get commissions. Small ones, but still. And I realized this morning that I'm happy, genuinely happy. For the first time in years, I wake up and I don't dread the day. That's because of you, but it's also because of me, because I finally chose myself." Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling the slight tremor in her frame, the vulnerability of someone learning to stand in their own strength. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I'm proud of us," Elena corrected, "for trying, for being honest, for not running when it gets scary." Over the following months, they built something together that looked nothing like either of their previous relationships. There were no grand gestures or passionate declarations, just steady, deliberate choices to keep showing up for each other. Elena met Daniel's sister Lisa, who sized her up with the protective intensity of someone who'd watched Daniel struggle for years and wasn't about to let anyone hurt him casually. Elena handled the interrogation with grace, answering honestly about her divorce and her intentions, and her understanding that Mia came first. "I like her," Lisa told Daniel afterward. "She's real. That's rare." Daniel met the few friends Elena had maintained through her marriage, people who'd watched her slowly vanish into Marcus's vision of who she should be and were cautiously optimistic about her emergence. They welcomed Daniel not as Elena's savior, but as her partner in rebuilding, which felt accurate. Mia gradually relaxed around Elena, her initial wariness transforming into genuine affection. They developed their own relationship separate from Daniel, art lessons where Elena taught Mia to paint, trips to the Natural History Museum, conversations about Elena's divorce that Mia approached with the gravity of someone who understood that adult relationships were complicated. "I like that she doesn't pretend everything's perfect," Mia told Daniel one night. "Sophie's mom's boyfriend acts like everything's always great and it's so fake. Elena's honest about being scared and messing up. That feels more real." "It is more real," Daniel agreed. "Are you going to marry her?" The question caught Daniel off guard. "We've only been together a few months, sweetheart." "I know, but are you?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "Maybe someday, if we both want that. But there's no rush, we're just figuring out how to be together first." "Good," Mia said. "I like her. But I also like that you're taking it slow. It feels safer that way." Daniel hugged his daughter, overwhelmed by her wisdom and grateful that even in the midst of his own emotional growth, she felt secure enough to be honest. Work at the nonprofit continued to challenge and fulfill Daniel in equal measure. Patricia recommended him for a leadership training program, telling him bluntly that he had potential to run his own program if he wanted. The thought terrified and excited him. More responsibility, more pressure, but also more opportunity to help families navigate systems designed to defeat them. Meanwhile, Elena's art career slowly gained traction. She had a small solo show at a gallery in Culver City. She started teaching painting workshops to supplement her income. She collaborated with other artists on a project examining themes of identity and transformation. The money wasn't substantial, but it was hers, earned through work that felt meaningful. 6 months into their relationship, they had their first real fight. It started small, Elena canceling plans at the last minute because she'd gotten caught up in a painting and lost track of time. Daniel, who'd arranged his schedule and Mia's around those plans, felt disrespected. He said as much, more sharply than he intended. Elena got defensive, accusing him of trying to control her time. Daniel accused her of being inconsiderate. The argument escalated in that terrible way fights do when both people are triggered by old wounds that have nothing to do with the current conflict. "This is exactly what Marcus did," Elena said, her voice rising. "Getting angry when I didn't perform on his schedule, making me feel guilty for choosing my work." "I'm not Marcus," Daniel cut her off. "I'm asking you to respect my time, not control your life. There's a difference." "Is there? Because it feels the same from where I'm standing." "Well, maybe that's your trauma talking, not reality," Daniel snapped, then immediately regretted it. The silence that followed was awful. Elena's face went white. "I need to leave." "Elena?" "No, I need space. I need to think." She left, and Daniel stood in his apartment feeling like he'd just blown up the best thing in his life through sheer stupidity. He called his sister. "I messed up," he said without preamble. "Tell me." He explained the fight, the escalation, his comment about trauma. Lisa listened without interruption. "Yeah, you messed up," she confirmed. "That was a low blow." "I know. But she also needs to understand that canceling plans last minute isn't okay when other people have built their lives around those plans. You both have valid points underneath the fighting. So what do I do? Apologize for the trauma comment. That was unfair. Then have an actual conversation about expectations and boundaries when you're both calm. This is fixable, Danny. But you both need to be willing to hear each other. Daniel texted Elena. I'm sorry. What I said about trauma was cruel and unfair. Can we talk when you're ready? The response came 2 hours later. I'm sorry too. I was defensive when I should have just apologized for canceling. Can you come over tomorrow? Yes. They met at her apartment, both nervous, both determined. Elena had made coffee, and they sat on her small couch surrounded by paintings in various states of completion. I was wrong, Elena said, to cancel last minute without real consideration for how that affected you and Mia. That was thoughtless. I was wrong, Daniel countered, to throw your trauma in your face. That was cruel. But you weren't entirely wrong, Elena said quietly. I do sometimes see Marcus in places he isn't. I'm still learning to distinguish between reasonable boundaries and controlling behavior. It's confusing sometimes. And I sometimes forget that you're still healing from years of being controlled, Daniel admitted. I need to be more patient with that process. I don't want patience if it means you can't tell me when I've actually done something wrong, Elena said. I need you to be honest with me, even when it's uncomfortable. Otherwise, I'll never know if I'm slipping into old patterns. They talked for hours, establishing clear expectations around communication and schedules and the ways their respective traumas could hijack otherwise minor conflicts. It wasn't easy or comfortable, but it was real. Two people learning to navigate their damage without letting it destroy what they were building. My therapist says this is good, Elena said toward the end of their conversation. Fighting and repairing. It means we're building trust that the relationship can survive conflict. You're in therapy? Started a few months ago. Should have mentioned it, but I was worried you'd think I was too broken to be in a relationship. I think therapy is healthy, Daniel said. I should probably be in therapy too. So we're both works in progress. Always, Daniel agreed. They kissed then, tentative and then less tentative, a physical affirmation that they'd survived their first real rupture and come out stronger. Summer arrived, bringing long days and the kind of heat that made Los Angeles shimmer. Mia turned 12, celebrated with a beach party that Elena helped organize, complete with a whale-shaped cake that Elena had stayed up half the night painting in intricate detail. Mia's friends were impressed, and Mia herself was radiant, blowing out candles surrounded by people who loved her. Best birthday ever, she told Daniel that night. Even better than when I turned 7 and Mom actually showed up. The casual comparison to his ex-wife, the implicit acknowledgement that Elena's presence meant something significant, made Daniel's chest tight with gratitude. Late that night, after Mia had gone to bed exhausted from sun and sugar, Daniel found Elena on his apartment's small balcony, looking out at the city lights. Thank you, he said, for the cake, for being there, for all of it. I love her, Elena said simply. She's an incredible kid. You did that, you know. You raised someone genuine and kind and brave. We did it together, Daniel corrected. Me and her. We figured it out as we went. Elena turned to face him, her expression serious in the dim light. I want to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out. Daniel's stomach dropped. Okay? I love you, Elena said. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you probably since that first coffee, maybe before. And I know it's only been 6 months and we're taking things slow and there's no pressure for you to say it back, but I needed to say it because I'm tired of hiding how I feel out of fear. Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd learned to reclaim her own voice, who'd chosen uncertainty over comfortable misery, who'd somehow fit into his complicated life like she belonged there. I love you too, he said, and meant it completely. They stood together on the balcony, the city sprawling below them full of other people's struggles and triumphs, and it felt less like an ending than a beginning, not of something easy, but of something true. The confession hung between them in the warm summer night, 3 words that felt both inevitable and terrifying in their honesty. Elena's hand found Daniel's, their fingers interlacing with the easy familiarity of people who'd learned to hold each other steady through uncertainty. "I meant it," Elena said softly. "I know my track record with love isn't exactly reassuring, but this feels different. You feel different." "Different how?" Daniel asked, needing to understand what she saw in him that justified this leap. "With Marcus, I was always performing, always adjusting myself to fit his vision of who I should be. With you, I'm just myself. Messy and scared and still figuring things out. And you don't try to fix that. You just witness it." She paused, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. "That's love, I think. Not the fairy tale version where someone completes you. The real version where someone sees you completely and chooses to stay anyway." Daniel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with paint thinner and summer heat. "I spent so long thinking love meant sacrifice, that being a good father meant giving up everything else, that helping you meant I was neglecting Mia. But you've shown me that's not true, that I can be a father and a partner and myself all at once." "Can you?" Elena pulled back slightly to look at him. "Because I worry about that sometimes, that I'm taking time and energy you should be giving to Mia. Mia told me last week that she likes me better now than before I met you. She said I seem lighter, like I'm not carrying the weight of the world by myself anymore." Daniel smiled at the memory. "She's right. You've made space in my life for something beyond just survival. That makes me a better father, not a worse one." They stood together in the darkness, Los Angeles spreading below them in all its chaotic glory, and let the significance of what they'd admitted settle into reality. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened into something that felt less like tentative experimentation and more like genuine partnership. Elena started spending more nights at Daniel's apartment, her painting supplies gradually colonizing one corner of his living room. Mia adjusted to the increased presence with surprising ease, even claiming she liked falling asleep to the sound of Elena painting late into the night. "It's like having someone creative in the house," Mia explained. "It makes everything feel more alive." Daniel's work at the nonprofit continued to evolve. Patricia officially promoted him to program director in August, a title that came with actual decision-making authority and a modest raise that, while not life-changing, at least allowed Daniel to stop calculating every grocery purchase down to the penny. "You've earned this," Patricia told him during their meeting about the promotion. "You care about these families in a way that can't be taught. That matters more than any credential." The new position brought new challenges. Daniel now supervised a small team, managed budgets, interfaced with donors and board members. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and he loved it with an intensity that surprised him. This was work that mattered, work that changed lives in tangible ways. One afternoon in late September, Daniel was reviewing case files when his phone rang. An unknown number, but something made him answer. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes?" "This is James Chen, David Chen's brother. He gave me your number. I hope that's okay." Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew David Chen was Elena's divorce attorney, but he'd never spoken to the man's brother. "What can I do for you?" "I'm a journalist. I'm working on a story about financial abuse in marriages and divorce proceedings. David mentioned that you played a significant role in helping his client, I won't use her name without permission, recognize her situation and find the courage to leave. I'd like to interview you, if you're willing." Daniel's immediate instinct was to refuse. His role in Elena's story felt private, not something to be exploited for public consumption, but James Chen continued before he could decline. "I know this is uncomfortable, but the truth is most people don't recognize financial abuse as abuse. They think if someone has money and comfort, they can't be trapped. Your perspective, as someone outside the marriage who witnessed it clearly, could help other people see what's happening in their own lives, or help friends and family members recognize when someone they love needs support." Daniel thought about that night in the Mercedes, about Elena's desperate whisper asking him to drive somewhere private. He thought about all the people who might be sitting in similar prisons, surrounded by luxury, but slowly disappearing, convinced they had no right to complain because others had it worse. "Let me talk to Elena first," Daniel said. "This is her story, more than mine." "Of course. I've already reached out to her through David. She said she'd only participate if you were comfortable with it." That evening, Daniel and Elena sat in her small studio apartment, surrounded by her latest paintings, a series exploring themes of captivity and freedom through bird imagery, and discussed the interview request. "Do you want to do this?" Daniel asked. Elena stared at one of her paintings, a cardinal escaping a gilded cage, its wings still adjusting to flight. "Part of me wants to pretend that whole chapter of my life never happened, just move forward and never look back." But pretending doesn't help anyone. If talking about what I went through could help even one person recognize their own situation, wouldn't that be worth the discomfort? She turned to him. "What do you think?" "I think you've already done the hardest part, which was leaving. Everything after that is just testimony to your courage." Daniel paused. "But I also think you don't owe anyone your story. You get to keep it private if that's what you need." Elena was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Let's do it, together. But I want to be clear that this isn't some rescue narrative where you saved me. I saved myself. You just reminded me that saving myself was possible." "That's exactly what I'll tell them." The interview happened 2 weeks later, conducted over video call with James Chen in his office in San Francisco, while Daniel and Elena sat together in her apartment. James was professional and compassionate, asking questions that focused on the patterns of control and financial abuse rather than salacious details. Elena spoke clearly about her experience, the slow erosion of independence, the way Marcus had used money as both carrot and stick, the isolation disguised as luxury. Daniel added his perspective about that night, about recognizing someone drowning in circumstances others envied. "What would you say to someone in a similar situation?" James asked Elena toward the end of the interview. Elena didn't hesitate. "That your fear is valid, but it's not a life sentence. That leaving might be the hardest thing you ever do, but staying in a situation that's erasing you is harder in the long run. That you don't need permission to choose yourself." She glanced at Daniel. "And that sometimes all it takes is one person who sees you clearly to remind you that you're worth saving." "And for the people who might be that one person," James directed this question to Daniel, "the friend or colleague who suspects someone is in an abusive situation but doesn't know how to help?" Daniel thought carefully before responding. "Listen without judgment. Don't minimize their experience because it doesn't look like your idea of abuse. Don't pressure them to leave before they're ready, but also don't enable their rationalizations for staying. And be prepared for the fact that helping might cost you something. It might cost you a job or a friendship or your comfort, but some things are worth the cost." The interview would be published the following month, James told them, a feature story for a major magazine about financial abuse and the hidden prisons of wealth. After they disconnected the call, Elena and Daniel sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd just shared with a stranger who would share it with thousands more. "I feel exposed," Elena admitted, "but also lighter, like I finally closed that chapter completely." "Are you okay?" "I will be." She leaned against him. "As long as you're here, I'll be okay." October arrived with its particular Los Angeles brand of autumn, warm days and cool evenings, the light turning golden and forgiving. Mia started 7th grade with the enthusiasm of someone who'd discovered the marine biology club at school. She came home bubbling with information about ocean acidification and coral bleaching, her passion finding community with other kids who cared about the planet's waters. "There's this guy in my class, Jordan, who wants to study oceanography too," Mia told Daniel one evening over dinner. "He's really smart, and he actually listens when I talk about whale migration patterns instead of just pretending to care." Daniel exchanged a glance with Elena, who was trying not to smile. "Just a friend?" "Dad, I'm 12. Yes, just a friend." Mia rolled her eyes, but she was blushing. "Can I invite him and his mom over for dinner sometime? Elena, you should make that pasta thing you made last week. He'd probably like that." "I'd be happy to," Elena said, and Daniel watched his daughter and his partner plan a dinner party with the easy collaboration of people who'd become genuinely comfortable with each other. This was what healing looked like, Daniel thought. Not some dramatic transformation, but quiet moments of normalcy that would have been impossible a year ago. A daughter confident enough to invite a boy over. A partner integrated enough into their lives to be part of planning. A father who could witness these moments without the constant anxiety that it would all collapse. The article came out in late October, a thoughtful 5,000-word piece that James Chen had titled The Gilded Prison: When Wealth Disguises Abuse. Elena's real name wasn't used. She'd chosen the pseudonym Elena P., but her story was told with nuance and respect. Daniel's role was mentioned but not sensationalized, presented simply as someone who'd listened at the right moment. The response was overwhelming. Within days, the article had been shared thousands of times across social media. People reached out to Elena through the magazine, sharing their own stories of financial abuse and control. Several thanked her specifically for articulating experiences they'd struggled to name. One woman wrote that she'd contacted a divorce attorney the day after reading the piece, finally understanding that her husband's control of all finances wasn't normal or acceptable. "I can't believe this many people are living like I was," Elena said, scrolling through messages on her phone. "I thought I was the only one stupid enough to get trapped like that." "You weren't stupid," Daniel reminded her gently. "You were vulnerable and he exploited that vulnerability. That's on him, not you." "I know. Intellectually I know that, but sometimes the shame still sneaks up on me." "That's normal. Healing isn't linear." Elena looked at him, her expression soft. "When did you get so wise about trauma?" "When I realized I was carrying my own and needed to stop pretending I wasn't." The conversation reminded Daniel that he'd never actually dealt with his divorce beyond surviving it. He'd focused so completely on Mia's needs and his own practical survival that he'd never processed the grief and failure and anger that came with watching his marriage disintegrate. That week, Daniel finally took his sister's long-standing advice and scheduled an appointment with a therapist. His first session was uncomfortable in the way that honesty always is initially. The therapist, a woman in her 40s named Dr. Martinez, asked him to talk about his marriage and divorce, and Daniel found himself articulating things he'd never said aloud. How he'd felt like a failure as a husband and father when Sarah left. How he'd internalized the message that he wasn't enough, not successful enough, not wealthy enough, not interesting enough to keep her interested. How he'd spent years trying to prove his worth through relentless work and sacrifice, never quite believing he deserved rest or happiness or help. "And now?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Now I'm in a relationship with someone who actually sees me, who doesn't need me to be anything other than myself. And it terrifies me because I keep waiting for the moment she realizes she could do better." "Better meaning what?" Daniel struggled to articulate it. "Someone without so much baggage. Someone who can afford to take her to nice restaurants instead of cooking pasta at home. Someone whose life is less complicated." "Has Elena given you any indication she wants those things?" "No." "So you're creating a narrative in which you're not enough based on what Sarah wanted, and projecting that onto Elena even though Elena has consistently demonstrated she wants exactly what you are." The clarity of it was startling. "Yeah, I guess I am." "That's worth examining," Dr. Martinez said gently. "This pattern of believing you need to earn love through sacrifice and perfection. Where do you think that comes from?" Daniel had homework after that session, to think about the messages he'd internalized about his worth and where they originated. The work was uncomfortable but necessary, pulling back layers of protection he'd built without realizing it. Meanwhile, Elena's art career continued its upward trajectory. A gallery in Santa Monica offered her a solo show for the following spring. She started getting commissioned for larger pieces by collectors who'd seen her work in the group show. The money still wasn't substantial, but it was enough that she could move from her studio apartment to a small 2-bedroom house in Highland Park with a yard and a separate studio space. "I want you and Mia to see it before I sign the lease," Elena told Daniel. "Make sure it feels right." They visited on a Saturday morning, Mia immediately claiming the smaller bedroom as perfect for sleepovers, running through the house with the enthusiasm of a child who'd never had a yard before. The studio space was a converted garage with excellent light, and Elena stood in it looking both overwhelmed and determined. "It's more than I thought I'd be able to afford," she admitted to Daniel. "But I can make it work if the commissions keep coming, and having a proper studio means I can take on bigger projects." "You should take it," Daniel said. "You think?" "I think you've earned the space to create, literally and figuratively." Elena signed the lease that week, moving in with help from Daniel, Mia, and a couple of artist friends who seemed bemused by Elena's happiness. One of them, a sculptor named Marcus, coincidentally sharing the same name as Elena's ex-husband, which they all carefully didn't mention, pulled Daniel aside while they were carrying boxes. "I've known Elena for 8 years," Marcus the sculptor said. "Through her whole marriage. I watched her shrink and fade and lose herself completely. I never thought I'd see her like this again, confident and creating and actually smiling. I don't know what your deal is, but thank you for not being another asshole who tries to control her." "She controls herself now," Daniel corrected. "I'm just along for the ride." "Good. Keep it that way." The house became another piece of their evolving life together. Elena's space, but also increasingly their space, with Mia's sleepover bag living permanently in the guest room closet and Daniel's coffee mug claiming a spot in the kitchen cabinet. They never formally discussed moving in together, but by December Daniel was spending more nights at Elena's than at his own apartment. "We should probably talk about this," Elena said one evening as they cooked dinner together in her kitchen, moving around each other with practiced ease. "About what?" "About the fact that you're basically living here but still paying rent on your apartment. That seems financially inefficient." Daniel felt his chest tighten with familiar anxiety. "Are you asking me to move in?" "I'm observing that you already have. We just haven't made it official." Elena set down her knife, turning to face him fully. "But if we're going to do this, I want to do it right. I want us to actually discuss what it means and how it works and what we both need." So they talked about finances, how they'd split costs fairly given their different incomes, about space, how Daniel would need areas that were his own, not just living in Elena's house, about Maya, how they'd maintain routines and ensure she felt secure in the transition, about their relationship, how they'd protect time for each other while also maintaining individual identities. It was practical and unromantic and absolutely necessary. "I need to know I'm not losing myself again," Elena said. "That having you here won't mean I start accommodating and adjusting and shrinking to fit." "And I need to know Mia comes first," Daniel countered. "That if she's struggling with this, we slow down or adjust or whatever she needs." Agreed. They decided to wait until after the holidays to make it official, giving Mia time to process the idea and themselves time to ensure they were making the choice for the right reasons. Thanksgiving arrived, and for the first time in years, Daniel didn't spend it alone with Mia and whatever frozen turkey he could afford. Elena hosted at her new house, inviting Daniel's sister Lisa and her family, along with a few of Elena's artist friends. The gathering was chaotic and loud and imperfect. The turkey was slightly dry, someone dropped a pie. Mia and Lisa's kids got into an argument about climate change that somehow ended with everyone laughing. It felt like family. Not the idealized version from magazines, but the real version where people disagreed and made mistakes and loved each other anyway. After everyone left, Daniel helped Elena clean up while Mia dozed on the couch, exhausted from excitement and too much pie. "Thank you for this," Daniel said, washing dishes while Elena dried. "For including us, for making us part of your life like this." "You are my life," Elena said simply. "You and Mia. This is where I want to be." December brought the kind of clarity that only comes from sustained commitment. Daniel officially gave notice on his apartment, he and Mia packing up their modest possessions with a mixture of nostalgia and relief. That apartment had been their sanctuary after the divorce, the place where they'd learned to be a family of two. But it was also cramped and limiting, a symbol of survival rather than thriving. Elena's house, their house now, represented something different, space to grow, room for all of them to exist fully, a foundation built on choice rather than necessity. Mia took to the transition with surprising enthusiasm, decorating her new room with whale posters and fairy lights, claiming the backyard as perfect for the telescope she wanted for Christmas. She seemed to understand instinctively that this move wasn't about replacing her old life, but expanding into a new one. "I like that we have more space," she told Daniel as they unpacked boxes in her new room. "But I also like that Elena's here. It's nice not being just the two of us all the time. Don't get me wrong, you're great, Dad, but having someone else around who cares about us? That's pretty cool." "You really like her," Daniel observed. "Yeah, she doesn't try too hard, you know. Some adults are always performing, trying to get kids to like them. Elena just treats me like a person. Plus, she's teaching me to paint, which is awesome, even though I'm terrible at it." "You're not terrible." "Dad, I painted a whale last week that looked like a deformed potato. I'm terrible, But Elena says that's okay, that art is about practice and perspective, not perfection. Mia paused in her unpacking. Is she going to be here forever? Like, are you going to marry her? The question was direct in that way Mia had of cutting through adult hedging to the core issue. I don't know about forever, Daniel said honestly. Nobody can promise forever, but I love her and she loves us, and we're building something good together. That's all I can tell you right now. That's enough, Mia said. I just wanted to make sure you were serious, because I'm getting attached to her, and if she leaves, that's going to suck. It would suck for me too, Daniel admitted, but I don't think she's going anywhere. Good, because she makes you happy, and you deserve to be happy, Dad. You've spent my whole life making sure I was okay. It's nice seeing you take care of yourself too. Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by the wisdom of this almost teenager who'd somehow learned compassion despite witnessing her parents' failures. Christmas came quietly. They spent it at home, their home, with Mia opening presents under a tree they'd decorated together, Elena making pancakes in a kitchen that smelled like vanilla and coffee, Daniel watching his two favorite people exist comfortably in the same space. He'd gotten Mia the telescope she wanted, saving for months and justifying the expense, because some dreams deserved investment. Elena had gotten her a beautiful journal with a whale embossed on the cover, and a note inside that read, "For recording all the amazing discoveries you're going to make." For Elena, Daniel had commissioned one of her artist friends to build a custom easel, something he'd saved for by taking on extra consulting hours at the nonprofit. It wasn't expensive by her old standards with Marcus, but it was thoughtful, made specifically for her height and working style. Elena had cried when she opened it. "You notice things," she said. "The way I have to adjust regular easels because they're too tall. The way I work better standing than sitting. You actually see me." "Always," Daniel promised. For Daniel, Elena had painted something he hadn't known he needed, a portrait of him and Mia from a photo she'd snapped months earlier at the aquarium. They were looking at each other rather than the camera, both smiling, captured in a moment of genuine connection. The painting wasn't photorealistic, but impressionistic, capturing something essential about their relationship, the tenderness and trust and deep abiding love. "This is us," Daniel said, staring at it. "This is how I see you," Elena corrected. "How you've always been. You just couldn't see it yourself." That afternoon, while Mia was outside testing her new telescope, Daniel and Elena sat together on the couch, surrounded by wrapping paper and the quiet contentment of a day well spent. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said. Elena tensed slightly. "Okay?" "I've been in therapy for a few months now, working through stuff from my divorce and childhood and my tendency to equate love with sacrifice." "That's good," Elena said carefully. "How's it going?" "Hard, but helpful. I'm starting to understand why I always feel like I need to earn my place in people's lives. Why I sabotage good things because I don't believe I deserve them." Daniel turned to face her fully. "And I'm working on believing that I can have this. That I don't need to keep waiting for you to realize you made a mistake." "I didn't make a mistake," Elena said firmly. "You keep acting like you're some fixer-upper I settled for. But Daniel, you're the first man I've been with who doesn't need me to be anything other than myself. You're kind and honest, and you're raising an incredible daughter, basically, by yourself. You work a job that actually matters. You help people because you care, not because it benefits you. Those aren't flaws I'm overlooking. Those are the reasons I love you." "I'm working on believing that," Daniel said. "It's just hard to undo 35 years of programming." "I know. I'm working on my own programming too, learning that a healthy relationship doesn't mean losing myself, that I can be loved and still be independent." Elena took his hand. "We're both works in progress. That's okay. We've got time." January arrived with its promise of fresh starts and continued work. The magazine article had continued to generate responses, and Elena had been invited to speak on a panel about financial abuse at a women's advocacy conference. She was terrified but agreed to do it, preparing carefully with support from her therapist and Daniel. Daniel attended the panel, sitting in the back of the conference room and watching Elena speak with hard-won confidence about her experience. She was articulate and honest, neither minimizing her suffering nor sensationalizing it. Several people approached her afterward, thanking her for sharing, saying they'd recognize themselves in her story. "You're helping people," Daniel told her on the drive home. "Really helping them. You took your worst experience and turned it into something that gives other people permission to choose themselves." "I couldn't have done it without you," Elena said. "You could have. You would have. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you're too strong to have stayed trapped forever." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I'm glad you were there that night." "Me too." February brought Valentine's Day, which they'd agreed to keep low-key given their shared wariness of romantic performativity. But Daniel wanted to do something meaningful, so he planned a simple evening, cooking dinner at home while Mia had a sleepover at Sophie's, followed by stargazing in the backyard with the telescope Mia had graciously agreed to let them borrow. Over pasta and cheap wine, Elena told Daniel about a major commission she'd been offered: a series of paintings for a corporate lobby, substantial money and exposure. "It's the kind of opportunity that could really establish my career," she said, "but I'm terrified I'll mess it up." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I've watched you work. I've seen the way you approach each painting like it matters, the care you put into every brushstroke. You're talented and dedicated. You've earned this." Elena's eyes were bright. "I keep waiting to feel like a real artist, like someone who deserves these opportunities." "Imposter syndrome," Daniel said. "My therapist says most people feel like frauds even when they're legitimately successful. The feeling doesn't mean it's true." "Your therapist sounds smart." "She is. You should meet her sometime. Maybe we could do a joint session, talk about us." Elena looked surprised. "You'd want that?" "Yeah, I want to do this right, build something sustainable. And if therapy can help us do that, I'm willing to invest in it." They did eventually do couples therapy, working with Dr. Martinez to establish healthy communication patterns and navigate the complexities of blending their lives. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was valuable, giving them tools to address conflicts before they escalated into real damage. Spring arrived with its California extravagance: wildflowers in the hills, warm days and cool nights, a sense of renewal that felt earned rather than given. Elena's solo show opened in April to strong reviews and solid sales. Daniel stood in the gallery watching strangers examine Elena's paintings, hearing them discuss the themes of captivity and freedom, transformation and rebirth. Elena had titled the show Emergence, and standing there surrounded by visual representations of her journey from erasure to selfhood, Daniel felt profound pride in this woman who'd chosen the hard path of growth over the comfortable path of stagnation. "What do you think?" Elena asked him during a quiet moment. "I think you did it. You rebuilt yourself into exactly who you wanted to be." "We did it," Elena corrected. "I couldn't have gotten here alone." "Maybe not, but you did the work. I just witnessed it." Mia's 13th birthday arrived in May, marking her transition into official teenagerhood with all the complexity that implied. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year, her face losing its childish roundness and taking on the sharper angles of approaching adulthood. But her enthusiasm for marine biology remained constant, and for her birthday, Daniel and Elena had arranged something special: a whale-watching tour off the coast of Santa Barbara. They drove up the coast early on a Saturday morning, Mia practically vibrating with excitement in the back seat. The boat tour lasted 4 hours, and they were lucky enough to see a pod of gray whales migrating north with their calves. Mia stood at the boat's railing, tears streaming down her face, as she watched these massive creatures she'd studied and loved from a distance. Daniel put his arm around her, and Elena stood on her other side, the 3 of them witnessing this moment of pure joy together. "Thank you," Mia whispered, not taking her eyes off the whales. "This is the best thing anyone's ever done for me." "You deserve it," Elena said. "You deserve all the beautiful things, Mia." That night, back at home, exhausted from sun and sea and excitement, Mia said something that stopped Daniel's heart. "I'm glad you found Elena, Dad. I'm glad you didn't just stay alone because you thought that's what being a good father meant. You're happier now. That makes me happier too." Daniel hugged his daughter, overwhelmed by the gift of her acceptance, her wisdom, her generous heart. Summer unfolded with its routines. Work at the nonprofit where Daniel had been promoted again to regional coordinator, Elena's commissions and teaching, Mia's marine biology camp. They settled into being a family in the truest sense, not defined by legal documents or traditional structures, but by the daily choice to show up for each other. One evening in late July, sitting in the backyard after Mia had gone to bed, Elena said, "I have something to ask you." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Okay?" "It's been a year and a half since that night you drove me to the Overlook. A year since we told each other we love each other. 9 months since you moved in." Elena took a deep breath. "I know we've both been hurt badly by marriage. I know we're cautious about repeating past mistakes. But I also know that what we have is real and sustainable and worth protecting legally." She pulled out a small box from her pocket, opening it to reveal 2 simple silver bands. "I'm not asking you to marry me in the traditional sense," Elena continued. "I'm asking if you want to build something permanent together. Not because we need legal validation, but because I want to make a formal commitment to you and Mia. I want to choose you deliberately, publicly, permanently." Daniel stared at the rings, at this woman who'd gone from desperate and trapped to confident and free, who'd learned to trust herself enough to trust him. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, I want that." They married in September, a small ceremony in their backyard with only Mia, Lisa, and her family, and a handful of close friends present. Mia served as both flower girl and best person, beaming with pride. Elena wore a simple white dress she'd bought at a vintage shop, not because she couldn't afford more, but because it felt right. Daniel wore his one good suit, the one he'd bought years ago for job interviews, now worn but serviceable. The ceremony was brief, focused less on legal formalities and more on the promises they were making to each other. To stay honest even when it was hard, to give each other space to grow, to choose each other daily, rather than taking the relationship for granted. "I choose you," Elena said, sliding the ring onto Daniel's finger. "Not because you saved me, but because you saw me. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. I choose you, and I choose us, and I choose this life we're building together." "I choose you," Daniel echoed, his own ring sliding onto Elena's finger. "Not because you need me, but because we make each other better. Not despite our damage, but including it. I choose you, and I choose us, and I choose this family we've become." Mia cried. Lisa cried. Even some of Elena's stoic artist friends cried. Afterward, they had a simple dinner catered from a local restaurant, cake from a nearby bakery, dancing in the backyard to music from someone's phone. It was nothing like Elena's first wedding with its 300 guests and magazine coverage. It was nothing like the future Daniel had imagined during his first marriage. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. Later that night, after the guests had left and Mia had gone to bed exhausted from excitement, Daniel and Elena sat in their backyard under the stars. "We did it," Elena said softly. "We actually did it. We survived our worst experiences and built something beautiful anyway." "We're still building," Daniel corrected. "This isn't an ending. It's just a confirmation of everything we've been doing all along." "I know, but it feels significant anyway. Like we're closing one chapter and opening another." Daniel thought about that night 18 months ago, about the woman who'd asked him to drive somewhere private, about the choice he'd made to help despite the cost. He thought about everything that had followed, the job loss and financial struggle, the slow building of trust, the gradual merging of their lives. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked suddenly. "Helping me that night? Everything it cost you?" "Not for a second," Daniel said. "Every hard thing that came after led here. To us, to this life. I'd make the same choice again." "Me too," Elena said. "I'd choose to leave Marcus again. I'd choose to be broke and scared and starting over. I'd choose all of it because it led to choosing myself, and then choosing you." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about rescue or sacrifice or losing yourself in another person. It was about seeing and being seen. About choosing honestly rather than performing perfectly. About building something sustainable from the wreckage of what came before. Inside the house, in her room decorated with whales and stars, Mia slept peacefully, secure in a home built on honesty and choice rather than obligation and fear. Tomorrow she'd wake up to a family that looked different than the one she'd been born into, but felt more solid, more real, more capable of weathering whatever storms came next. And Daniel and Elena would wake up to each other, to another day of choosing this life, this love, this hard-won peace they'd built from courage and honesty and the simple revolutionary act of refusing to disappear. The city lights spread below them, thousands of other lives being lived in thousands of other ways. Somewhere out there, other people were sitting in cars or empty houses, feeling trapped by circumstances they couldn't name. Somewhere, someone was gathering the courage to choose themselves. Somewhere, a quiet act of witness was changing the trajectory of a life. Daniel pulled Elena closer, feeling the solid weight of her against him, the ring on his finger a promise he intended to keep not through sacrifice but through presence, through seeing her clearly every day and choosing to stay, through building a life where neither of them had to disappear to be loved. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "That we made it," Daniel said. "We actually made it to the other side." To the other side of what? Fear. Desperation. Surviving instead of living. He kissed her forehead. "We're living now, really living. That's everything." Elena tilted her face up to his, and they kissed under the California stars, two people who'd learned the hardest way that freedom required courage, that love required honesty, and that choosing yourself wasn't selfish, it was survival. And in that moment, in their backyard with their sleeping daughter inside, and their whole imperfect, beautiful life spread before them, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.